Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual workshop, meeting sponsored by the California Air Resources Board. Today's meeting is part of our Advanced Clean Fleets regulatory efforts of achieving a zero-emission truck and bus California fleet by 2045 everywhere feasible and significantly earlier for certain market segments such as last mile delivery, public fleets, and drayage applications. The goal of this effort is to accelerate the number of medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle purchases to help achieve a full transition to zero emission vehicles in California as soon as possible. My name is Craig During, and I am managing the efforts for the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. So by entering this Zoom meeting, you are agreeing to being recorded. A copy of this recording will be made available on our website. Today's meeting is the third and last of our 3 workshop series this week to provide an overview of the updated draft regulation language released on April 25th. The focus of today's meeting will be on the drayage truck requirements of this regulation. Materials for today's meeting are available on our website, which includes access to the workshop agenda, presentation, and the draft regulation language that we will be discussing today. And we will be dropping links to those documents in the chat box if you need them. Our website also provides links to our informal comment log and comment submittal form. Again, more information on how to access materials and submit comments will be discussed during our presentation. Today's meeting is scheduled to end by noon, and the meeting agenda provides details and estimated times for when specific topics will be discussed. Our intention is to allow for full and open communication throughout the meeting and allow our stakeholders to ask questions, seek clarification, and provide comments specific to this part of the regulation. During the meeting, the chat and ask question features on your Zoom dashboard will not be available. Therefore, you will only be able to ask a question or make a comment verbally by raising your hand and using your microphone. We will call upon individuals in the order your hand was raised. When called upon, we do ask that you unmute your mic and state your comment or question. And as a reminder, please introduce yourself by first stating your name and affiliation before making your comments. Due to the expected large number of participants, I would very much appreciate if speakers can limit your comments to no more than 2 to 3 minutes so others have an opportunity to speak. And finally, I would like to recognize my colleagues and panelists who will be presenting and answering questions during our workshop today. They include Tony Brazil, Harinder Fagura, Lashay Cobley, Olivia Lane, Jessica Johnston, Paul Arnasia, Molly Munns, and others who will introduce themselves when called upon. If you do experience technical difficulties during the meeting, please email Harinder Fagura for assistance. His email address can be found on the meeting notification bulletin you received to register for this event. Okay, with that said, let me introduce our first presenter today, Harinder Fagura, who will walk us through the first part of today's presentation. Harinder?
Thank you, Greg. Hello, everyone. My name is Harinder Fagura, and I am in the Mobile Source Control Division. For today's workshop, we'll be going over a brief introduction and background of the state's emission reduction goals, the zero-emission vehicle market overview, and a detailed regulatory overview of the drayage truck requirements. We will conclude today's workshop with an overview of the emissions benefits and the next steps. Meeting materials for this workshop and other workshop meetings from this week can be accessed through our meetings and events webpage of the Advanced Clean Fleets website. In addition, staff will continue to accept informal comments through the informal comment docket, where the comments are posted online through meetings and other means to work through issues. Early feedback on proposal is welcome and encouraged. As seen on this slide, California has the worst air quality in the nation. Major reductions of oxides of nitrogen, or NOx, and fine particulate matter emissions, or PM 2.5, are needed to achieve federal air quality attainment. As many of you know, the truck and bus regulation requires most diesel trucks to have a 2010 or newer engine by 2023, but more needs to be done. In addition, the legislature and the governor are addressing our climate challenge by setting aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets to achieve carbon neutrality and zero carbon grid by 2045. As seen on this chart, transportation contributes 40% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in California. This increases to about 50% when including upstream emissions. In September 2020, the governor signed an executive order N-79-20 that established targets for the transportation sector to help put the states on a path of carbon neutrality by 2045. In addition, the California Air Resource Board has developed a suite of planning documents to provide a roadmap in how to meet all our emission reduction goals. The Advanced Clean Fleets regulation is one part of these efforts. This slide narrows to truck transportation. There are approximately 1.8 million trucks operating in California in many different configurations and sizes. Although Class 7 and 8 tractors only account for 12% of the total population, they represent about 48% of the daily NOx emissions statewide. Next, we'll be providing some background on the zero emission vehicle market. One of the primary zero emissions market drivers is the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation to ensure a wide range of trucks are available and the ZEV market is supported. As seen in the table, this regulation requires truck manufacturers to sell zero emission vehicles as an increasing percentage of their total annual sales beginning with the 2024 model year. This regulation also included a one-time fleet reporting requirement, which I will discuss in the next slide. In April 2021, CARB collected truck and fleet operation data required by a one-time reporting requirement. The data collected is summarized here and available in an aggregated form on our website and is helping us with a rulemaking effort. California is not alone when it comes to deploying zero emission vehicles. There are currently 12 other states that have adopted California's light duty advanced clean cars regulation and 6 other states that have adopted our medium and heavy duty advanced clean trucks regulation. In addition, 17 states, including the District of Columbia and the province of Quebec, Canada, have signed a memorandum of understanding committing to electrification across medium and heavy duty vehicle sectors. As you can see on the map, West Coast states have adopted the ACT regulation and have committed to zero emission vehicle deployments. This improves the potential for accelerating ZEV truck corridors. This slide shows that there are more than 140 commercially available zero emission vehicles across every vehicle weight class category in a wide variety of configurations, and manufacturers continue to make announcements for new product offerings. I'd also like to point out that there are already more than 500 ZEV models available worldwide. Taking a closer look at zero emission tractors, you can see that there are 8 commercially available models today, with more coming in the near future. The majority of trucks in class 4 and above are manufactured using a cab and chassis, and then they are upfitted with a body configuration to meet its primary intended function. The same thing applies to zero emission trucks. As seen on the slide, the same zero emission model cab and chassis is used for multiple truck configurations. This slide shows the fleet data that was collected from our one-time reporting requirement, where fleet owners were asked what their daily mileage was for different truck types. As you can see, most trucks operate less than 100 miles a day. This is largely consistent with prior data collected from the Vehicle Inventory and Use Survey in 2018 and shows that mileage needs can already be met by zero-emission trucks that are available today. We recognize that for some work trucks, daily operational mileage does not paint a full picture and have factored that into our thinking. I will now turn it over to our next presenter, Lachey Cobley, who will discuss drayage truck requirements of the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Harinder, and good morning, everyone. I'm Lachey Cobley, an air pollution specialist here at the California Air Resources Board. Today, I'll provide a background on the existing requirements for drayage trucks, give a general overview of the new draft drayage truck regulatory concepts being proposed for the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, and then provide additional detail on some of the main requirements. The current drayage truck regulation was adopted in 2007 and will formally sunset on December 31st, 2022. Beginning in January of 2023, drayage trucks must be compliant with CARB's truck and bus regulation and meet a 2010 or newer model year engine standard. At the beginning of this year, there were approximately 44,000 fully compliant model year 2010 engine or newer class 7 and 8 drayage trucks registered in the statewide drayage truck registry. This number reflects California-based companies with California-based trucks. The recent increase in cargo at seaports, intermodal rail yards, warehouses, and in our surrounding communities underscores the need for action to transition the drayage sector to zero-emission vehicles. In addition, it's important to note that seaports and intermodal rail yards that fall under this regulation are all located within 1 mile of a disadvantaged community. I think this further emphasizes the need for CARB to take immediate action to minimize health impacts associated with drayage trucks and protect the climate. Staff is building off of the structure and lessons learned from the existing drayage truck regulation with the strategy of vehicle turnover to zero emissions technology to minimize the negative health impacts of drayage activities on nearby communities. This table displays the 2019 drayage truck inventory and provides an estimate of the population of drayage trucks that visit the Port of Oakland, the ports of LA and Long Beach, other seaports and rail yards throughout the state. Staff analyzed data provided by the ports and rail yards to estimate the populations that you see here. The first row of the table, in-state Class 8 active trucks, is what has been used in the drayage inventory as baseline population. Staff gathered detailed data to determine the average vehicle counts per month, which correspond to less than 112 trips per year. As such, this analysis assumed that trucks with at least 112 trips per year or more than 2 trips per week were a part of the active drayage fleet. Staff expects to continually update the baseline inventory in upcoming impact versions. Under the proposed regulation, drayage truck fleets, which are defined as in-use, on-road Class 7, 8 vehicles that operate on or transgress through a California seaport or intermodal rail yard, will be required to transition to zero emissions beginning in 2024, with full implementation by 2035. Note that the 2024 start date for the first zero emission compliance deadline has been updated since the last discussion, which required the registration of legacy trucks to end in 2023. The 2035 full zero emission compliance date is in alignment with the goals of the governor's executive order in 7920. This date also aligns with other state, regional, air district, and local air quality planning efforts. In addition, the requirements being proposed for the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation complements the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation to ensure the transition and market demand for zero emission vehicles. The proposed regulation aims to maximize emission reductions from drayage trucks and applies to the owners and operators of drayage trucks, which also includes entities with common ownership and control, drayage motor carriers, marine or seaport terminals, intermodal rail yards, and rail yard and seaport authorities. We will cover the specific requirements in the next few slides. This slide illustrates the Drayage Truck Regulation Fleet Zero Emission Technology transition process beginning in 2024. All drayage trucks intending to begin or continue operations at a California seaport or intermodal rail yard must be registered in the CARB online system. Beginning in 2024, only zero emission trucks will be eligible to be added to the registry. And by 2035, all trucks in the CARB online system will be required to be zero emissions. Non-zero emission trucks in the CARB online system with a 2010 or newer model year engine and that have visited a seaport or rail yard at least once in 2024 would remain into the system until they reach either 800,000 miles or the engine is older than 18 years, whichever comes first. Beginning in 2025, trucks will be removed if they did not meet the annual visit requirement or if they've exceeded their minimum useful life requirements. I'll now move to discuss the scope and applicability of this proposal, and then I'll get into the requirements of the rule. Here we have provided the definition of drayage truck. Given that drayage describes a duty cycle and not a specific vehicle type, it is important to define the operations that are subject to the proposed regulation. These trucks are typically part of a specialized fleet that primarily moves cargo to and from seaports and intermodal rail yards to near dock, local, or regional transloading facilities or warehouses to be stored or repackaged before the cargo moves to the next destination. The definition of drayage truck is consistent with the existing drayage truck regulation and describes requirements for Class 7 and 8 vehicles operating both on and off seaport and rail yard properties. The proposed regulation includes reporting requirements for seaports and intermodal rail yards. While these definitions are consistent with the previous draft of our regulatory language, there are a few minor changes. For example, staff provided some specificity to the definition of intermodal rail yards by identifying that these facilities are owned and operated by Class 1 railroads and receive both drayage trucks and locomotives. I'll now move to discuss the specific requirements for legacy drayage trucks and zero emission drayage trucks. Legacy drayage trucks are compliant, non-zero emission drayage trucks that are registered before January 1st, 2024. Legacy drayage trucks must register with the CARB online system by no later than December 1st of 2023 in order to meet that requirement, and must visit a seaport or intermodal rail yard annually to remain in the system. In terms of the reporting requirements, beginning in 2025, legacy drayage trucks older than 12 years should report their odometer mileage by February 15th of each calendar year. Legacy drayage trucks will remain in the reporting system until they meet their minimum useful life requirements. Here you see the definition of zero emission vehicle. This definition allows for both battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles to be compliant with this regulation. As I have previously described during this presentation, only zero emission trucks will be allowed into the CARB online system beginning in 2024, and all drayage trucks transitioning to zero emissions by 2035. Here's a list of the vehicles that are exempt from the proposed drayage regulation. These vehicles are all currently exempt under the existing drayage truck reg. While these vehicles may also visit a seaport or intermodal rail yard, they are not included because they are considered a special vehicle type. The only change in this section of the regulation text is that we have clarified the definition of emergency under the definition for declared emergency event. The vehicle delivery delay extension is a new component of the drayage truck proposal. It is consistent with the proposed high priority fleet section of the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation and has been included to address stakeholder concerns about the potential delivery delays for zero emission drayage trucks. The extension will be available if a drayage truck delivery is delayed for reasons beyond a truck owner's control, and the zero emission truck is ordered at least 1 year before a compliance deadline. Vehicle owners will need to provide the purchase agreement to CARB staff. I'll now provide an overview of the reporting requirements for seaports and intermodal rail yards. This rule will require seaports and intermodal rail yards to report the VINs, license plates, and visit frequency of all drayage trucks that visit their facilities on an annual basis beginning on January 1st, 2024. This reporting requirement is for both internal combustion engines and zero-emission trucks. This reported information will ultimately be used to strengthen CARB's emissions inventory. Note that the pictures shown on the slide do not represent all of the facilities that will be subject to the reporting requirements that I just described. Seaports and intermodal rail yards will also be required to report information on non-compliant vehicles as well. This includes the VINs, license plate, and the date and time of entry of the non-compliant vehicle. This information is needed for enforcement purposes and will help to ensure that only clean and compliant vehicles service California's ports and intermodal rail yards. In summary, the proposed requirements build on the existing drayage truck regulation and reporting requirements. Legacy drayage trucks registered prior to 2024 that have visited a seaport or rail yard at least one time in 2024 can continue operating as usual until the useful life mileage or age limit is exceeded. Requirements for zero-emission trucks will start in 2024 and have been updated from our initial proposal of 2023. And finally, the goal is to establish an all zero-emission drayage truck fleet by 2035. I'll now hand things over to my colleague, Olivia Lane.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Lane, and I'm an air pollution specialist at the Air Resources Board. So I'm going to cover emissions, outreach, and next steps. Okay, so again, I'm first going to start with emissions, and then I'm going to go over our outreach efforts for the regulation, infrastructure and funding, ZEV resources for fleets, and our next steps. Okay, so the ACF emissions inventory was developed using the latest available MFAC 2021 model, which was released to the public this Monday. Most of the methodology and assumptions used in the inventory modeling stayed consistent to those that were presented in the inventory work group meeting last November, with recent updates to the regulatory language reflected in the following slides. The results shared here are all compared to what we refer to as the legal business as usual baseline, which considers recently adopted regulations such as the Advanced Clean Trucks and Heavy Duty Omnibus regulations. So one thing to note is that the current inventory does not include the impact of Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance regulation, as it is still pending approval from the Office of Administrative Law. So by 2050, the total NOx emissions benefit in California resulting from ACF as a whole is expected to be around 97 tons per day. Excuse me. We have also computed the projected emissions for fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5 emissions. So here we include both exhaust emissions and brake wear emissions. With the current proposed regulation, ACF will lead to approximately 0.3 tons per day PM 2.5 emission reduction in 2031 and 1 ton per day in 2037. In addition to criteria pollutants, we have also modeled the greenhouse gas emissions under the ACF proposal. So please note that the data presented here only includes tank to wheel or tailpipe CO2 emissions. With the current regulation proposal, ACF is projected to have around 20 million metric tons per year CO2 reduction by 2045. Okay, so over the next couple of slides, we will show the projected technology distribution under the proposed ACF regulation. And this projection not only includes the 3 different sectors or regulated groups, but also considers the 100% ZEV sales requirement, starting with model year 2040 for trucks that are first sold in California. So unlike heavier trucks that may be purchased out of state, almost all Class 2B through 3 vehicles will be first sold in California or are California certified. So the impact of the manufacturer sales requirement proposal is significant. With a 100% sales requirement by 2040, we would see ACF bring more zero emission class 2B through 3 pickup trucks and vans than ACT, the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, resulting in almost 600,000 class 2B through 3 ZEVs by 2045, which is more than a 30% increase compared to what was originally included in the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation. So for class 4 through 8 vocational trucks and buses with both the sales and the purchase requirements, the current regulation proposal will bring almost 200,000 ZEVs by 2035. And this number goes up to 360,000 by 2045, resulting in 85,000 more than the Advanced Clean Trucks could bring in alone. Okay, so the difference between the Advanced Clean Trucks and the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation projection becomes more significant for the class 7 through 8 tractors. Based on vehicle registration and survey data that we use for MVAC development, many tractors were actually purchased out of state or with non-California certified engines. That is to say, a large portion of the tractor population will not be regulated under the Advanced Clean Trucks manufacturer requirements. However, since all fleet owners that are subject to the Advanced Clean Fleet requirements need to comply with the proposed ZEV transition pathways, including out-of-state vehicles that were originally not covered in Advanced Clean Trucks, we are seeing much more ZEVs in this group, resulting in approximately 270,000 zero-emission tractors by 2045. So overall, combining all weight classes together, the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation is consistently bringing more ZEVs as compared to the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, with more than 1.2 million zero-emission vehicles by 2045, a 60% increase as compared to the 780,000 brought by the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation. Okay, so to achieve our numerous climate change, air quality, zero emission vehicle deployment, and petroleum reduction goals, the state has adopted an aggressive multi-pronged strategy that uses incentives to complement our regulatory approaches. So to date, CARB has administered over $8 billion in funding to support clean transportation, and CARB strives to maintain a balanced portfolio of available investments. So each of these programs have their own distinct goals that support the state's broader strategy. And not every program can fund every worthy technology, but maintaining the integrity of the program goals is essential to ensure that the state achieves both immediate air quality benefits and that it supports the innovative technologies necessary to meet our vision of a zero emission economy. And then outside of CARB, our other federal, state, and local agencies have complementary funding sources as well. These investments have played a critical role to help advance technologies and bring us to where we are today. So this year, the administration has doubled down by proposing an additional $6.1 billion for equitable zero emission vehicle transportation over the next 5 years to the California Air Resources Board, Energy Commission, State Transportation Agency, and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. These investments build on the $3.9 billion ZEV acceleration package approved as part of the 2021 budget, bringing the state's total investments over a 6-year period to $10 billion. So moving on to outreach, beginning back in February 2020, CARB staff began informing the public of the proposed regulation and development process. So over the past 2 years, staff has hosted over 17 public work groups, workshops, and forums, and conducted over 273 group and individual meetings with over 130 stakeholders. We have also sent over 273,000 mailers to vehicle owners and sent numerous emails through our various listservs and the truckers reporting database system. Staff has also hosted broadly focused listening sessions where we hope to gather input on trucks and drayage activities. And we met with several groups of clean air advocates to ensure communities impacted most by medium and heavy duty truck traffic emissions were engaged in this process. We also offered outreach materials, training courses, and attempted to spread the word through social media, interviews, and in-person events, several of which will be taking place in the next couple weeks. And throughout all of this engagement and outreach, we have heard consistently the need for infrastructure and resources for fleets in their transition to zero emission technologies. Okay, so CARB hears you, and we are working closely with other state agencies to provide the framework for heavy duty zero emission vehicle fueling, especially the Governor's Office of Economic and Business Development, or GOBIZ, the California Energy Commission, and the California Public Utilities Commission. And two key aspects of this framework are planning and funding. In addition, CARB continues to discuss the issues surrounding infrastructure with stakeholders and electrical providers. Many of you might have tuned into our recent work groups on infrastructure, but if not, you can watch the recordings of these meetings on the Regulation Meeting and Events webpage. So staff is also working hard on making resources available for fleets who will be transitioning to these new technologies. There are several websites listed here available now with information on planning, total cost of ownership calculators, and funding resources. And there's going to be more added soon. Staff is also working on training opportunities with focus on zero emission technologies, and then eventually regularly scheduled trainings focused on this rule proposal. So we are also looking for innovative ways to encourage and support other fleets who are not affected by this rule, so that they too will transition to zero emission technologies. And we are looking for ideas that go above and beyond CARB's regulations, policies, and investments. So please stay tuned for upcoming listening sessions or focus groups where we're going to dive into these ideas. Okay, so this is our final slide. This you can find the link here for the informal comment docket. You can also find materials that support this workshop and our past workshops on the CARB website, Meeting and Events webpage. You can also contact us through our program email address or by the phone number listed on this slide. And then for the notice for the 45-day rulemaking package, we are expected to have that go out in early September of this year, and we'll be presenting to the board in October. Okay, so that concludes our presentation today. So we're going to move now to discussion. So I'll hand it back to you, Craig.
Great, thanks, Olivia. Yeah, that concludes our presentation. So at this time, this is your opportunity to ask questions. And to do so, remember that the chat feature has been disabled, so you'll need to raise your hand. We will call upon you in the order your hand was raised. And just a reminder, please state your name and affiliation before making your statement or asking your question. So I'll ask Molly to start the process on calling on our stakeholders who have their hand raised.
I have 9 participants, 10 with their hands raised. Sam Wilson, you're first in line. I have unmuted your mic. You can talk.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Sam Wilson with Union of Concerned Scientists here in San Francisco. I am just kind of curious about some of the new language in, I think it's section 2014 1, and my understanding here is that or the way I'm reading it is that it allows legacy drayage vehicles to operate for an additional year, pushing that date back by about a year. I don't have it in front of me. I don't recall like exactly what the dates are, but I'm curious, like, what is the impact here? Like, so what's the benefit of allowing the extra year and for fleets, and then what is the emissions impact from allowing those legacy vehicles to operate for an additional year? Thanks.
Hi, I'll take that. Hi, Jessica Johnston, working on the drayage truck component. So let me answer that partly, Sam. So what we have, and I don't know that it's an additional year. I think it is about 4 or 5 months, but we have started the initial zero emission trucks to be added in 2024, and that's in order for us to meet all of the regulatory timeframes. So once we get to the board and then it's approved by OAL, we'll be just in a short window prior to us being able to require those trucks to start entering the registry after January 1st, 2024. So it wasn't an additional year, but we did have to push out the time frame.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Thanks, Jessica. Sam, the emissions inventory was based on starting the drayage registry and in 2024. So everything's current, and the emissions reflect that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I'm seeing that it is from November 23 to January 2025. So that's just to kind of fit within the administrative timeline of the rulemaking.
Yes, so that's correct. So once we would have it approved, in order for us to begin the implementation, that's what we had to realign some of those dates.
Okay, thank you.
Next in line to speak is Chris Shimoto. Chris, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Thank you. Chris Shimoda with California Trucking Association. Good morning. So I know in previous discussions on infrastructure and in some of the work that the Energy Commission has done and some of the work that we've done estimating charging needs to support this rule, that the estimates for the drayage fleet in the ports of LA and Long Beach alone will need around, let's call it 1,000 megawatts or a gigawatt of peak charging capacity to support the total transition of this fleet. So I've got 3 questions here. So question 1 would be, how many megawatts of charging for class 7 and 8 trucks the staff estimates exist today or is currently under construction in the area of the ports of LA and Long Beach? And then also for the other seaports and class 1 rail facilities subject to this rule, if that info is available, but more specifically in the ports of LA and Long Beach.
Okay, I can respond to that. So part of like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of work going on in the infrastructure space right now. So one of the, if you're talking specifically like Port of LA and Long Beach, I believe that they're looking at, and we expect there's going to be kind of a approach where you're going to have some of the public charging, some of them are going to have some of the private, or home-based charging. So we can, we're looking at some of those studies that are out there, like the ports of LA and Long Beach have their infrastructure fueling, let me get the right title here. The Fueling the Future Fleet that they published in 2021, and they're looking at having about 9 public charging stations available in 2025. So some of that work's being done, but we're happy to follow up with you on more specifics of what those needs are, especially because we're looking at a ramp up for the drayage trucks to start in 2024. So
got it. So so my follow-on questions, and I figured that was probably going to be the answer, is so knowing what is in the Port of Long Beach study, I'll back up and say, so I think the answer is probably the infrastructure has not been developed to support this regulation yet. And I do know that the Port of Long Beach study estimates that in land that it controls, it could do approximately 22 megawatts, and that could take anywhere from as quickly as 2 years to as slow as 7 to 10 years, dependent on upstream factors, and especially where the projects are for fast charging. And so the line of questioning is really about, can staff explain why, given that we have nearly no charging infrastructure today, and given that the studies that have been done on this issue suggest that we can deliver a tiny fraction of that infrastructure in as, potentially long of a horizon as 10 years, why did the infrastructure delay provisions in the high priority fleet side of this rule, why were those not incorporated into the drayage portion of the rule as well?
Okay, yeah, and this is actually, Chris, good point. We were looking at, how can we align that if that's something that we do implement on the drayage side, as we try to share, some of the fleets are going to be, part drayage and part over the road. So those are some of the things that we're still working through as far as like aligning the language, aligning the delay, implementation, et cetera. So, we understand there's a large demand. The infrastructure is very complicated. We have a lot of different partner agencies working on this right now. But that is something that, we can put under consideration. So appreciate that comment. It's something that has been brought to our attention already.
Got it. No, appreciate that. And then just one final question. I appreciate the indulgence. So again, just with respect to consistency between high priority fleets and the drayage portion of the rule, so range extended hybrids, various all electric ranges are considered equivalent to ZEVs until 2035 under high priority fleets. Given a lot of the same challenges with respect to range will exist here as well. Wanted to ask, what was staff's thinking between the inconsistency between the two regulations treatment of range extended hybrids? As we've talked about in the past, I know, Jessica, the Port of Oakland, for instance, you are going to have portions of that fleet coming from the Southern Central Valley out into Nevada, from the ports of LA and Long Beach. Some of those routes do extend out into Arizona and Nevada. So just wanted to hear the logic behind not including, the equivalent provision for range extended hybrids.
Well, we can, like I said, we can take that into consideration. There are some more advanced or, kind of planning for the ports specifically outside of, the other fleets. So I think they were looking to at least, capture some of that ZEV fleet. We do have a tighter timeline as far as the executive order. And, but it is something we can take into consideration. We'll continue to discuss, how we align some of the two rules together. So
let me jump in too. I mean, so when we're looking at the high priority fleet requirements, we're talking about every kind of truck that exists everywhere in the state. And that is a very different problem than, and in terms of infrastructure placement, other things like that, than it is for drayage. Although, yes, you are identifying examples where they might actually even go across state lines. We're still talking about some pretty well-defined corridors that you can strategically place infrastructure. And here we're talking specifically about tractors as opposed to, drill rigs and digger derricks and concrete pump trucks and things of that nature. So it is a bit of a different animal. And then, as Jessica touched on, the timelines are slightly different, and obviously in the way the requirements are phased in. But broadly, it's because we're talking about such a wide universe of trucks over the entire state that you would need to have infrastructure solutions absolutely everywhere for it to make sense. Whereas around the ports, there are strategic placement where our basic vision is that, yeah, some of this regional type deliveries are going to be accelerated around certain corridors, and the ports are well suited to take advantage of those corridors. And then over time, we would expect a further expansion of infrastructure to then provide solutions for other trucks.
Yeah. And I want to add one more thing to what Tony just said. And, we do see that, as technology starts to improve over time as well, Chris, we still have some of that legacy fleet that can continue to do those moves that are extended into the valleys or that are beyond the normal or current range capacities of some of those zero emission vehicles. So we do see that, the technology is going to improve over time as well. So we see, some of that being able to be rolled out in the legacy trucks used in those additional moves. So.
Yeah, and Chris, I want to make sure that everybody's also aware. I mean, a considerable amount of funding has been allocated to facilitate the faster deployment in the drayage category. More than 1,000 trucks at this point have been approved for funding to be deployed in California. And there are, I'm not as familiar with the details, but do not forget that hydrogen is a potential solution here that we're not ignoring. So yes, a lot of your comments relate to battery electric, but I think there's some demonstrations planning to start, I think this year, if anybody can help me on the details, that will be operating essentially between Oakland and Bakersfield, which is quite a distance on a regular basis with fuel cell trucks. So there are other solutions than just charging and battery electric as well that kind of need to be factored into the thinking.
No, I appreciate that, Tony. And just one last closing comment, and again, appreciate the indulgence. A demonstration project for a regulation, which the purchases will need to occur, honestly, in the next 6 months to meet that timeline, I don't think is going to give a lot of comfort to fleets that we're still in the demonstration phase on, one of the cornerstone technologies to make this rule work. Some food for thought with respect to the gigawatt of charging in Southern California alone. We are talking about class 7 and 8 trucks. The type of trucks in this market right now are, typically going to be a 500 kilowatt hour plus size battery with the associated charging needs that come along with that size of battery pack. Even at, I think it's the 2030 standard of a 75-mile all electric range, you're talking about probably 150 kilowatt hour battery. So just something to think about with respect to the strain on the infrastructure that is being created, when you treat NZEVs differently under this rule and high priority fleets. So appreciate the time. Look forward to chatting more with you as the process goes forward.
Next in line to speak is Colby Morrow. Colby, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Colby Morrow with Southern California Gas Company, and I hope this is a pretty simple question. I believe it is for Olivia. And so I noticed yesterday, well, first I want to say these have been really great workshops. I've learned a ton, but so here's the question again, sorry. Yesterday I noticed on the CARB website, the Community Air Protection website under Community Hub, that it has ACF emission reduction estimates in the disadvantaged communities. And so I was just curious if that inventory drives, and let's see, I wrote down the slide numbers, slides 35 through 37.
I don't know if Stephanie's on the line, but she might be able to speak to our emissions inventory better than I could.
Yeah, this is Stephanie Cohn. I'm the lead staff working on the emission inventory. I'm not entirely sure which website that you were referring to, but I'm not sure, if you were asking, the two, I guess the numbers that we show here match with the other one, but there's a chance that we might use different version of MFAC.
Okay, so you know what I can do is I will email you the link And, you know, we can do it offline. So I don't want to take a bunch of time, but thank you very much. I'll email you the link, Stephanie, okay?
Sure, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Next in line to speak is Ryan Kenny. Ryan, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Yes, hi, good morning. I'll agree with Colby too. These workshops have been very well presented and very helpful. So thanks for the time this week. I wanted to focus on slides 12 and 13. And I have a couple questions about them. I was wondering what the source was for the numbers of commercially available vehicles. And I'm also wondering what the definition is of commercially available.
So Ryan, this is Craig. We gathered this information from, we took a lot of this from our HVIP, which is our incentive program for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And they have a definition of what's commercially available. It has to be, you know, able to be ordered at the dealership and, you know, deliverable. We also did a study with UC Davis, and they did an extensive research on identifying which makes and models were available today and which ones are coming in the near future. So those are the two primary sources of where we got this information available.
Thanks, Craig. That's very helpful. I know the CalStart ZETI tool, I think, is also
yes, the ZETI tool. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to bring that up especially because we've done a pretty deep dive on the availability of these vehicles. And, you know, obviously these slides kind of show them in a vacuum, as Chris kind of alluded to. Infrastructure is in question, cost, performance. That's not really, you know, that's part of the story here with these vehicles as well. And, you know, we have some very significant concerns with the reliability of the ZETI tool. Because if you go on the ZETI tool website and you click on North America in the heavy duty truck category, the tool highlights 14 manufacturers, but of those 14, only 2 are currently producing electric trucks. That's BYD and Volvo. And Volvo has a very limited spec truck with a 100-mile range, which obviously doesn't really help with the big tractor Class 8 vehicles. So that I think is flawed, and we of course can continue this conversation maybe in a different time. But I also wanted to highlight, you know, several of the trucks mentioned on the slides. Tesla does not have a truck in production at this time. Nikola doesn't have any production trucks right now. The BYD 8TT has been available for several years. Yet there are almost no examples of this truck being used in the drayage market. There might be a few small pilot and demo projects, but the truck is currently not being used in any scale. 2 others that kind of jumped out as well. The Peterbilt 579 EV has also been deployed in a few small scale demo and pilot projects, but there are no real commercial orders being placed by the market. And the Freightliner E Cascadia is only suitable for a portion of the drayage market. The truck has a limited range capability and cannot serve the holistic needs of the California drayage market. Only some of the drayage applications can be met by this truck. It's also very, very expensive. So I just wanted to highlight, that's just basically the tip of the iceberg, I think, with a lot of the zero emission trucks that are listed here. And maybe we can have a conversation offline about that. But I'm just wondering, I'm concerned that, you know, these assumptions are being made that of these being available when they are not, or they have significant problems, and yet, you know, they're going into the regulation as though they are available. So I just want to leave it there at that. Maybe you can provide your initial thoughts, and we'd love to continue the conversation if possible.
This is Tony. I'll just add, I mean, no, the ZETI tool was not used for this analysis. I mean, some of the issues that you've raised about vehicle mileage capability and so on, or that the market is very early in its infancy are true. And that is part of what's being factored into the overall strategy. And again, there will be roughly 1,000 on the road very soon here, and more coming. And we're, even with the drayage part being one of the most aggressive timelines that we have, we're still talking about 2035 for a transition. So that's not exactly overnight either. And frankly, that's part of the point of having regulations, is to provide that certainty so that those investments get made in infrastructure. Because we do have, as everyone I think recognizes, there's a little bit of a, lack of a better term, is a cliched chicken and egg scenario where you're not going to go spend a bunch of money to put in a station if you don't have the expectation the trucks are going to be there to use it, not going to have the utilization. Those need to be aligned, and that is in part why we're looking at trying to accelerate the drayage market ahead of the broader market, because there are these options, and as I touched on before, even the demos that we're expecting to see here on the hydrogen trucks, they are being demoed with the same effective capabilities as diesel trucks, and just a matter of them actually becoming commercial. So those are not on this list per se, but things are changing fairly rapidly as well. Yeah, and we're looking forward into the future. I mean, there's reasonable expectations as to what things will go, or how they'll go, and there frankly are a number of options out there. So I don't know if I missed any key points, but I think we could leave it at that.
All right, next in line to speak is Alejandra Miritran. Alejandra, I've unmuted your mic, you may speak.
Good morning, Alejandra Miritran with the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce. Well, my point was exactly Ryan's point, although he is much more knowledgeable than I am. I mean, the only experience I can share is that our members here in Otay Mesa have been inquiring on purchasing these ZEV vehicles. And for example, Freightliner is one of the companies that our members is working with. And basically they said, well, you can order one today and it might be available in 2.5 years. And it's actually 2.5 more times expensive than a regular diesel truck. So this thing about, this is the slide that I wanted to refer to, available today does not seem very realistic at all. So I guess my question to CARB is, can you actually provide a list of manufacturers that actually do have these trucks that are viable for drayage and today, so we can like share it with our members, because none of them are finding an opportunity to actually purchase such a truck. And none of our members, by the way, in Otay Mesa are part of that 1,000 trucks that you mentioned that have access to funding, because they're these trucks are so much more expensive, in addition that we don't have the infrastructure, or we won't have it by then. So we're really confused as to how this is going to be accomplished. And if you can share that UC Davis report, if that's something that will be helpful to our members in terms of actually providing a contact, a company they can really purchase a truck today, that would be really helpful.
So Alejandra, I do want to comment. We're not expecting that zero emission trucks are going to be available next week. If you place an order today, you can't get a diesel truck for a year or even longer in many cases. So I want to make sure we're not talking like different language. We expect trucks to be available on similar timelines as conventional trucks. Realistically, some will be longer, some will be shorter. It really depends on what you're looking for, and obviously that as the different things are changing in terms of the economy and production plans. So that does vary, but yeah, and we do also recognize that yet these have a higher upfront cost, so there's infrastructure needs associated with that. But also today, in these, when we look at the regulation, we're not assuming funding would be used to offset those costs. We reflect the full costs, but the realities is today the utilities will, or at least the major utilities will help pay for most of the infrastructure upgrades required on the site, where applicable, or where somebody's putting in infrastructure. And the incentive programs have offset a lot of that upfront cost as well to get these early trucks out there. And as you may know, we expect that vehicle costs to come, the zero emission vehicle costs to come down with continued advancement in technology, and when they get into higher production volumes, because low volume production just always costs more no matter what it is. And so ultimately that's part of the picture. And the other part not to lose sight of is you may be aware multiple other states have effectively already adopted our ZEV sales requirements that we've adopted here in California. So the sales we're talking about are going to occur and not just in California, but in multiple states in the nation because of regulation. And we do anticipate that some of them will be voluntary as well. So all of those are helpful towards expanding this market, over time.
So just two follow-up questions on that. So are you assigning these incentive programs by geographic region? I mean, because we feel like in Otay Mesa, we're kind of being like, I mean, our members or our truckers are not able to access that yet. I mean, I don't know why the reason for that is, but it seems like when they seem to be interested, the pot of money is already gone. That's sort of one question. And then is CARB doing any kind of inflation analysis of the impact on pricing that this new regulation will have in California?
So the way you phrased it, I'll just approach it differently. We have looked at the cost of the regulation and have a cost analysis and had a discussion on assumptions and everything used in the past about it. That will be reflected in our SRIA and standard regulatory impact analysis and our staff report. That reflects the cost of buying the zero emission truck versus the cost of buying what a conventional truck would be and things of that nature. So ultimately the difference is what matters. So yeah, we do reflect those differences and what those upfront costs are, including what the infrastructure costs are, and then the fuel savings that you expect to see with the zero emission trucks compared to the conventional ones in terms of doing the cost analysis.
Can you share that? Does it also include in the assumption that a whole bunch of companies will go out of business because they won't be able to comply, and then you'll have less companies that most likely will be charging more as well?
No, we do not reflect that, because ultimately the analysis shows that on a life cycle basis, the zero emission trucks are actually more likely to save money than to cost more. And you might be aware that some of these even manufacturers on this list are offering, already forgot the term. They're offering truck as a service solutions, so that you in essence pay to use the truck and they deal with all of the upfront costs, provide infrastructure solutions for you, and so on. So I think if you look on the website, I'm pretty sure a couple of these manufacturers are actually providing those as solutions. There are other companies doing that too, recognizing that even though the costs are higher up front, that there's savings long term, and you can do a business model like that. I like to use the analogy that that's kind of the way things have worked for solar. Solar costs more upfront and so on, but there's companies out there that will install it for you, whether it's a school or a home or something like that, and you pay nothing upfront and you just ultimately pay for it over time. And so that's the same concept that's already being used. So there are ways to address the upfront costs through financing mechanisms. And in the terms of the funding, that was an important question. Does anybody know more details than I do? I mean, I know HVIP was giving out funds, and that was first come, first serve. And, there were tranches that were $30 million plus that were gone in 15 minutes once it was open. But I'm pretty sure HVIP has funding right now. It's still available. And people can apply for that. And then there's other funding sources too, because the Energy Commission has a program and so on. We have them on the one of the slides. So,
yeah, based on the HVIP website, you can reach there at californiahvip.org. There is money still available in the general category for any type of vehicle. So that's 12 million for fleets of any size plus 16 million for any fleet with 10 or fewer vehicles. So 28 million in total still available there. And still set-asides available for public transit fleets and small and medium-sized air districts. Well, for school buses in small, medium-sized air districts.
So
and Molly posted a link in chat.
yeah, so I encourage you to potentially look at those websites, and then ultimately you can contact our funding team for more details, and or even the air district, because some of these are administered by the air districts, for example.
Got it. And is that study you mentioned on the economic impact available?
The past workshops that we did on cost and the initial cost assumptions is online. It's one of the meetings that occurred, I can't remember now, 6-7 months ago. And then in our analysis for the final rule, as we're making changes, we change our cost analysis. That will be available in the standard regulatory impact analysis. I think that gets posted in possibly this month or next. And then our staff report, we will post all of the updated cost analysis for that in the September timeframe, 45 days, at least 45 days before the board hearing.
Yeah, so if you want to look at our recent cost analysis on total cost of ownership, that's available with our September workshop of last year in the meeting materials, if you want to look there. And as I mentioned, we'll have more materials coming up in shortly.
Thank you.
Next in line to speak is Dusty Garland. Dusty, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
All right, thank you very much. This is Dusty Garland from Peterbilt. Quick comment, because this comment was made a couple of times. I would say that there are real commercial orders and real commercial deliveries happening from Peterbilt, and so it may not be totally true that there are no trucks being delivered. That is going on right now. So you're welcome to search those. A couple of quick questions. If customers both operate inside and outside of the drayage market, so if they would be a high priority fleet and have trucks in the ports, do their purchases for port registry and delivery count towards their high priority fleet percentages if they opt into the percentage category?
Yeah, this is Tony. So the short answer is yes. So the way we're approaching it is that somebody who's serving the ports and has other trucks would have the option under the high priority portion to meet those percentage requirements, and they could count all of their drayage trucks as part of their whole fleet. So we would just look at the fleet as a whole, but the ones that are entering the ports and rail yards and so on would still have to meet the drayage basic requirement.
Okay, but they could sort of double dip there by buying port drayage trucks. They're meeting their port requirement and they're meeting their high priority fleet.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, so somebody wants to electrify more drayage trucks than minimum required, and that helps them meet the percentages of the other part, then that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second quick question, just to clarify, near zero emission vehicles are not an option to meet the drayage requirement, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but they are an option still to meet the high priority fleet requirement.
They still are, and we're getting various comments on that. And when we say near zero, we're talking about capable of doing a minimum all electric mile range,
Right.
Ranging anywhere from roughly 10 miles to 75 miles, depending on the model year. And
Sure.
and just for everybody's benefit, because it's come up a couple times, it's those range criteria are identical to what the manufacturer would be able to earn credits. So they have to have a minimum all electric range to get credits when they do their sales to comply with the sales requirement that the board already adopted.
Got it. Okay. And then the last question here. So we had a couple of customers that have expressed a concern about the drayage requirements that all purchases be zero emission after 2024, because they are hauling in refrigerated freight from out of state with short shelf lives. And so currently they don't warehouse that anywhere in California. They drive in, they go to the port, they ship it, and they drive out. Is there a plan around what happens with that type of freight, or the issues that could cause with range limited vehicles being the options right now for port operations?
Let me just make sure I understand the question here. So is the concern that these trucks are coming from out of state going directly into the ports and they wouldn't be zero, or they wouldn't be part of that legacy fleet?
Right. So if they wanted to replace any, so the fleets that we've spoken with about this, one specifically, they have a really short turnover time for their vehicles to maintain current emission standards and make sure they're driving clean trucks, but they are diesel trucks. And so as they move to 2024, they can't put a new truck on the port registry unless it's zero emission, but that truck can't travel from where they are into the port without stopping several times or warehousing the goods somewhere and then picking it up with an electric truck. So sort of both, I guess, to your question.
Right, yeah, the requirement would stand even for the out-of-state trucks to be zero coming in after 2024. So they would have the option to use some of their legacy fleet, you know, past 2024 if they were already registered, or they would have to meet the same requirements or, you know, change some of that business operation. I'm not sure either one.
Can I ask a follow-up question? What you said they had fast turnover times. How fast? How like what is that rate of turnover for those vehicles?
So a lot of our large fleets, I mean, it's 4 to 5 years. This fleet specifically was around the 3 to 4 year mark that they're cycling through vehicles and buying newer. So that's likely to extend, right, with their port vehicles if they're traveling from out of state, is they just won't be able to replace vehicles as often and maintain as clean the trucks.
I think the more information that we could get about this type of service that you guys are providing would be really helpful as we're building out the rule.
Okay, yeah, I'll get in contact with them and see if maybe we can get something together to send over to you. Thank you for considering that and taking that question.
Thank you, Dusty.
Next in line to speak is Philip Gibbons. Philip, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Thank you, and thanks to CARB staff for hosting this workshop as well as the other workshops this week. It's been a pleasure listening to them. I have a question and then a couple of comments that have already started to emerge this morning. My question first is on reporting requirements for Seaports. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I said I'm with the Port of San Diego. The reporting requirements, I think I know the answer, but I just want clarification. Is the reporting requirements only on class 7 or 8 trucks that meet the drayage definition? So for example, as you know, at our port, we have a lot of class 7 or 8 trucks that visit us that might be car carrier trucks, trucks that operate with power takeoff units, et cetera. Would those types of trucks, car carriers, trucks with PTO, would those need to be reported in our reporting requirements, or just class 7, class 8 trucks that are considered under this regulation as drayage?
Just reporting the trucks that fall under this regulation. So the class 7 or 8 that are considered drayage. Good question though. Thanks, Philip.
Okay, thanks. And I have a couple of comments, and we've started to hear some of these already. You know, I think I appreciate the ZEV delivery extension in this version of the regulatory language. I think that's important to consider for the fleets. I think the high priority fleets category has some really smart and flexible and practical exemptions or extensions that should carry over into the drayage side. We've heard some folks talk about the daily mileage exemption. To Dusty's point before, we do a lot of refrigerated cargo out of our terminals here in San Diego, and they travel very far. They'll travel from San Diego all the way to Salt Lake City, all the way up to Washington State. And that's going to be a problem for some folks that do have a high turnover rate on their vehicles. Now, I'm not saying that they should be exempted so that they can purchase a diesel truck. Maybe there's some opportunity for extension until they can get into something else, perhaps. I don't know the right solution there. Infrastructure construction delay extension in the high priority fleet, I think that makes sense as well to bring over to the drayage side. I get it. Over time, we're going to see more infrastructure installed throughout the major corridors, and fuel cell truck technology and infrastructure may become more prominent. But if it doesn't, then we have a big problem. Again, the trucks that operate at Port of San Diego are not typical seaport operations, 100 miles to 200 miles. 355 miles is sort of the average of the trucks in our calculation, how far they travel on a daily basis. So thinking about infrastructure, construction delay extensions in the drayage, I would like you to consider that as possible. And then lastly, on the incentive piece, to Alejandra's point as well from Otay Mesa, we want to make sure that there's funding equity across the state and that the money to support this transition is not only going to the ports of LA and Long Beach or the Port of Oakland. We want to make sure that other ports in California have a shot at this. And I would support set-asides for some of these smaller ports so that we can work directly with our smaller fleets to get them the funding necessary to make this transition happen. And I think, you know, the scale of the truck activity is much less here, which means that we could actually hopefully advance to zero emissions sooner, but we need the funding down in our neck of the woods as well. That concludes my comments for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you for that.
Next in line to speak is Ray Pingle. Ray, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Morning all, this is Ray Pingle from Sierra Club, California. Just a couple quick questions. One is for trucks that were purchased outside of California, if they're going to a California port, then by 2035, would they all have to be zero emission if they're coming into the port? And then secondly, how does that work for trucks registered out of California from 2024 to 2035, because they in terms of SB1 requirements?
So the current requirements apply to the out-of-state and in-state trucks. So for the out-of-state trucks, they'd still have to meet the same 2024 if you're coming into the registry, just like we require them now. So they'd have to be zero emissions, in-state or out-of-state. And they'd also be subject to that same criteria where we're only going to have all zero in the registry after 2035. And they will also have to report their mileage to us annually after 12 years.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. And then my second question is, in 2035, then the drayage fleet has to be entirely zero emission vehicles. So I understand that trucks, ICE vehicles, diesel vehicles will no longer be permitted in the ports, but can they still operate on California roads after that?
So for the trucks that we are after 2035, they'll have to be zero emissions. Any trucks that we've excluded with under SB1 or through their mileage when we take them out of the registry, they just are not going to be allowed at ports.
Okay, so they still could be driving on California roads at that point, right?
Yeah, if they haven't met their criteria, but we've excluded them from drayage, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Next in line to speak is Marielle Raucho. Marielle, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Hi, I'm Mariela Racho with American Lung Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and for hosting these workshops this week. California has the most difficult air quality challenges in the US. Our recent State of the Air report found that 98% of Californians live in a community impacted by unhealthy levels of ozone and or particle pollution. Trucks are a dominant source of regional and local air pollution burdens. This is clear near the ports and rail yards, but also warehouses and logistical areas. The study we released in March found that a widespread shift to zero emission technologies could generate $169 billion in public health benefits in California and save over 15,000 lives. We will provide more detailed comments, but want to encourage staff to include clear safe guardrails and limits on exemptions and extensions, maintain the focus on zero emission technologies only, move more quickly on milestones and timeframes for compliance, broaden the requirements for useful life retirement to encourage phase in of electric vehicles and phase out of the oldest, dirtiest trucks on the road, and support, including other facilities in the drayage category. The limited application for the drayage provision excludes communities heavily impacted by similar trucking activities in the Inland Empire and the San Joaquin Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariella.
Okay, next in line to speak is Jimmy O'Day. Jimmy, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Hi, everyone. Jimmy O'Day at CalStart. Just want to thank CARB staff really for 3 great workshops this week. Really clear information on where the policies are at. And really just want to call attention to how big of a step this policy collective, all 3 components are, just looking at the emission reductions. This is a really big step in the right direction for both climate and air quality, and meeting, pretty tough goals that we have to achieve for, limiting the impacts of climate change 2030 and air quality targets. A question on just the inventory. Do the rail yard trucks, what's the overlap between those and the port trucks? Is that 8,000 or 9,000 vehicles? Earlier in this, way at like the beginning, I forget if I probably know this.
I can answer that. I think Stephanie jumped off already, but we were able to do some kind of cross matching to be able to kind of remove any duplicates. So we did our best effort to make sure that we didn't have a duplicate fleet in there. So what you're looking at is what we would identify as a more dedicated rail type trucks that we see there.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And then just a couple comments on availability, demand. Just from a fleet's perspective, availability, the advanced clean trucks rule is so critical to availability, and from a manufacturer's perspective, the fleet rule is critical to the demand. So just want to call attention to the synergies of these 2 policies. The ZEDI tool that CalStart's developed was called out, and just want to comment briefly that tool pulls largely from the HVIP inventory and where vehicles are available in HVIP, and also conversations that CalStart has with industry and readings of just what's out there publicly. And it's an inventory that changes as things come available or don't. And just calling attention to, for Ryan, if you click on 2022, there's 12 manufacturers that come up, not 14. That list includes more than just tractors. It includes class 7, class 8. So there's a couple that are not tractors in there. But otherwise, it's pretty much a similar overlap with the HVIP inventory, where we've seen a lot of demand. I think the drayage set-asides are, subscribed, or if not at high demands. So 800 plus vehicles there, and just other news like what Dusty from Peterbilt said. They're seeing demand. Just one that stands out to me, there was an order for 200 BYD trucks in February. So I think that the demand is like these orders are being placed, and to not discount that the industry is moving along in a place that it definitely wasn't at a couple of years ago. So yeah, thanks a lot, CARB, for putting these workshops on.
Thank you.
Next in line to speak is Stacy Hammond. Stacy, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak. Your mic is still muted, Stacy.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for these workshops. They've been very helpful. I'm Stacy Hammond from Ryder Systems, Inc. I do have just I have 3 questions specific to what we're talking about today. My first question is more administrative. It's noted that the reporting needs to be completed by December 1st. When exactly will that database be open? Is it, I'm assuming, separate from the HDIM database, and is it connected? Is it one database including the priority fleets and the drayage reporting?
So what we're looking to do is we're looking to, I mean, these are kind of our general plan is to look at what we currently have registered and see if there's a way that we can transfer that information over for the legacy fleet. And then we're hoping to have that database be open, you know, hopefully before December for those for the new trucks coming in to report. So we're trying to look at how we align that with some of the other systems, whether that's truckers or others, so we have more of a consolidated system. But it looks and feels similar to what we have now in place.
Okay, so because just want to make sure we don't miss that deadline. Until then, we can continue to register in the existing Arbor.
Yeah, Arbor will continue to be open.
Okay. My next two questions sort of go together, and I know parts of these have been touched upon by Chris, Dusty, and Philip. Looking at, you know, the customers that we have that will be doing longer hauling drayage customers, is that, you know, and the same concerns that were brought up by Dusty on refrigerated long haul, could there perhaps be anything made a provision or other reporting taking away the current exclusion of being able to perform dray off so that those going to the ports are either legacy or ZEV, but can allow to transfer that container off to another non-drayage registered vehicle to go long haul?
So it's similar structure to what we currently have. So those trucks, we're not looking to encourage any type of dray off. So if that container is in its original form and it came or is going to a port or a rail yard, then it'll have to be moved by a zero emission truck or a truck that's compliant in the registry.
Okay, so then leading to my third question off of that is, in the high priority fleet, there is a provision for rental vehicles. So instead of being specific units, it can be that quarterly reporting of the fleet. Given that we are not operating the vehicles, and while I can prepare and have some legacy vehicles, you know, ready for use, if I have 50 vehicles that are reported for drayage, and 5 of those the customers, you know, in that year don't use, we're going to lose that ability to have those available. Is there anything possibly that could be similar for a rental flex that is not specific to that specific diesel vehicle as legacy, but a percentage of fleet?
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. And so if you had 10 trucks that you had set aside as registered for drayage, but they didn't visit a port that year, then
Correct.
or only 5, then you'd only have 5 for the next year for that. So,
Correct.
You know, we can talk about that, like take that under consideration for the rental fleets, but my general response is those you're going to have some type of zero emission truck available for that type of service. And that may fall under, Stacy, that also, like Tony said earlier, there is some shared fleet. So if part of your fleet needs to be upgraded to be zero, whatever pathway you would decide, then you could have part of those drayage trucks be part of that fleet.
Absolutely. It's just given that, you know, we can't have the vehicle sit and not being used just in case a drayage customer might need them. And when they do need one, what if it's not available in the nearby area because it's being used elsewhere?
Yeah, we can take a look at what they have for the high priority. And like, I think, you know, some of what we're going to try to do in our next kind of, as we revisit the rules, is see what kind of alignment we can make between the two if there's areas that we need to work through. So I can put that on our list.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Next in line to speak is Adam Browning. Adam, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This is Adam Browning for Forum Mobility, and I'm glad you mentioned earlier in the discussion with Alejandra truck as a service, because that's exactly what Forum Mobility does. We provide the truck and all the charging you need for one monthly fee, which is at or under the cost of currently running a diesel. The comment and question that I'd like to make right now is that we support the provisions of giving a delay to operators that have the binding purchase agreement while waiting for delivery, and request that similar treatment be given to the leasing or truck as a service model as well. There's been other commenters that have brought up supporting delays for infrastructure. And we support that, as we should not underestimate that challenge. It is a big one. I would just like to, comment that, while this sounds like, we're supporting a delay, what this actually accomplishes is it better facilitates a transition directly to ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, rather than forcing an intermediary investment in newer, slightly cleaner diesels that will continue to stay on the road for a long way. I think that in sum total, while leaving diesels on the road a little bit longer, again, you're facilitating the jump directly into zero emission vehicles, and we all benefit from that. I want to give a little more context around this. So this year, about 7,000 drayage trucks will fall off the registry, as far as I can tell. And we learned earlier this week from the good folks running the HVIP program that they've given out vouchers to about 1,000 trucks. Now, about 75% of that fleet are small owner operators, and as far as we can tell, almost none of those have received vouchers. So the bulk of the fleet, the small guys, are not getting the HVIP incentive so far. So CARB has developed that innovative small electric fleets program to encourage these innovative business models like leasing, like truck as a service, and to think that this is really going to be a crucial path to effectively provide access for ZEV solutions for the bulk of the fleet, and it should be accommodated within these delayed compliance provisions as well. So how do you feel about that?
Well, first, thanks, Adam, for kind of bringing up the truck as a service, kind of model that you guys are looking at. As far as the delays for the leasers, I believe that we're going to, it would be a universal application. So I don't think that we're saying it's only for an individual owner operator. It could also be for the fleets as well. So I think we're looking at that. As far as like some of the HVIP funding and all the funding, there's a lot of different funding sources, a lot of things that are coming forward. There's a lot of money that's been allocated to drayage specifically. So I think we're going to continue to work through kind of making sure that funding is, not only like I heard earlier, making sure it's equitable across some of the smaller ports as well. So those will go into our conversations we have with our funding teams. So
awesome. I mean, is there a single site where you can reference where all the different funding that's available to specifically to drayage trucks? Because I do know that like Carl Moyer has discussed, directing some of those funding programs into here, and there's some other programs, but it's a hustle to track all those down. It would be an awesome service if you're able to facilitate the aggregation and single point of reference of those conversations.
Yeah, and go ahead, Lachey.
I will say, Adam, on our website for the drayage specific, it was like a drayage standalone work group that we did back, I believe it was in December. There's a slide that has like all of the funding that's associated with drayage. So I know that's not the same as like the website where you're like, let me just have it here, but just so you know, there is that list in that former presentation.
Maybe if someone could provide that in the chat link, so I can figure out where that is.
Got it.
And I'm wondering, so again, like there is this upcoming deadline at the end of this year where, about a quarter of the current drayage fleet is going to be, that doesn't have a, that has a earlier than 2010 engine will be kicked off the registry. Is there any conversation around similar delayed requirements where if people don't want to like go out and hustle and buy like a new, a used diesel right now, but are having trouble getting delivery on a ZEV, have it apply to this upcoming end of year requirement?
I'll refer to Tony because that actually would be under the truck and bus rule. It wouldn't be a drayage specific requirement.
Got it.
Yeah, and make sure we're talking the same language. The truck and bus regulation will cover drayage trucks as well as any other diesel truck over 14,000 pounds. Starting January of next year, requires all of them to have 2010 engines or better to operate in California. So it's not limited to the ports. It's to operate. It's limited to or applies to the entire state.
Yep.
When there's a handful of exceptions, but that's the gist of the requirement. So we do expect a lot of trucks to be upgraded to meet that requirement. And that does relate to we do have that useful life language. So if you do have a 2015 model year, then you've got 13 years from that date at minimum and up to 18 to still operate that legacy truck in port service if they do register as continuing to operate in drayage service. So the question I wanted to mention that for others as well. It's like, there are the requirements, but we know that a fair number of the port trucks are already 2014, 15, 16 model years. And by this schedule, they're not going to have to transition overnight to zero emission. There's a whole phase in given the model year and life of the trucks.
I appreciate that. I guess specifically, Mike, you'll forgive me for not being entirely clear. But in this proposed rule that we're discussing today for the 2024, you're contemplating allowing people to continue to, if they are attempting to transition directly to a ZEV, to have some leeway in continuing to use the current diesel. I was just wondering if that could be, if that was being considered to be potentially applied to, the rule that is coming into place.
I got you. Okay, I missed that. But to give you the simplest answer, I just cannot foresee that being an option because the truck and bus regulation is part of our state implementation plan. It's federally enforceable. There's a lot more implications than might be apparent. And so to make a change of that nature would be just not something that we couldn't realistically consider, and definitely is outside the scope of what we've been describing as part of this rulemaking.
Yeah, fair enough. And again, just so it's clear, supporting these sort of bending of the efforts here simply as a way of getting to directly to ZEVs.
No, we're understood. And we like that idea, obviously, and that is in part where funding is helping now in the earlier market is, if you're going to have to replace a truck, if you can go to ZEV, why not do it now? But at the end of the day, we also need the emission reductions from getting rid of those older diesels and so on. And a lot of them. It's part of that.
Awesome. Thank you all for your efforts. We'll supply comments, just that the draft of the regulation, really talks about, a sale of a truck, not it doesn't also include language around leasing or truck as a service. So we'll submit comments to that effect, but glad that you're already thinking about it. And thank you for your efforts.
Thanks, Adam.
Next in line to speak is Thomas Jelinek. Thomas, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Hi, my name is Thomas Jelinek. I'm with PMSA, the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. We represent marine terminal operators and ocean carriers serving California ports. What we're primarily concerned about with the proposed regulation is ensuring that there is an adequate pool of truck capacity to move cargo from California ports. And so I have a couple questions for staff regarding the potential impacts of the rule. First, one of the things that we're concerned about is come January 2024, we will be left with a legacy drayage fleet that can only be increased through the purchase of zero emission trucks. And one of the things that we need to make sure that the manufacturers and the infrastructure is in place for is to handle cargo surges. Cargo does not move at a consistent level on over the course of a year through California ports. It fluctuates with seasons. That's why I think when you look at data on trucks, you have what are sometimes referred to as infrequent drayage trucks, or I think in the term you used, inactive. They're not really inactive. They are part of the port's surge capacity. Surges occur as a result of seasonal changes, Christmas, for instance. They also result in changes in trade flows. They happen as a result of changes in tariffs. They happen as a result in changes in consumer demand. None of these things are inside the control of the ports or the goods movement. These are things that happen external that the supply chain responds to. And one of the things we want to make sure is that there is always an adequate capacity to move cargo. So I guess the first question is, if we run up to issues where there is constraints in trucking capacity and we aren't able to bring new ZE trucks after January 2024 online to serve the ports when there is a cargo surge, and the ability to, because today we have the ability to draw from the entire California diesel truck fleet and bring them in on a temporary basis. And when I say bring them in, this is not like the ports or terminal operators or carriers doing this. This is the market responding to market demands. Is there some sort of mechanism that can be crafted into this rule to handle changes in short, rapid changes in cargo volumes?
Can I ask a follow-up question to make sure I'm understanding? It sounds like the types of cargo surges you're describing are things that would happen annually. So is the concern that the visit requirement would stop that from happening? I guess, yeah, I'm not fully following.
Yeah, I think that is one concern. You have, if you look at the history of the Clean Trucks program at the ports of LA and Long Beach, there is a large portion of the fleet that does not serve frequently, but they're there because we have what we refer to as the peak season. Cargo volumes increase for a couple months and then decline. If those and we also see, and that gets to a second question I have, we see lots of natural turnover in the port drayage fleet. Based on 5 years of data from the port's drayage truck registry, we see anywhere between 100 and 400 trucks being added on a monthly basis. Now, I have significant concerns if that level of turnover can be accommodated in the early years of this rule for zero emission trucks. And we certainly know, and we heard the discussion earlier, this infrastructure will not exist in the early years to support that level of turnover. So we will have, in essence, a static legacy fleet that, coupled with natural turnover and the need to accommodate cargo surges that do occur. Some of them you can predict on an annual basis, like peak season associated with Christmas, but also occur to things that are unexpected, tariffs, for instance, or the change in consumer demand that was brought on by the pandemic.
I'll defer the second part of your question, but I think in terms of what you're talking about with the predictable annual peak surges, Christmas and things like that, that seems to me to be complementary to the annual visit requirement, and that they'll be able to meet that 1 year. And so I think in that we sort of had that in mind when framing it, but I'll defer the other part of the infrastructure component to your question.
Well, let me just, the concern is they aren't necessarily the same trucks every year. That's where we get a lot of, we have, the data that's available in the Ports Drayage Truck Registry is, 100 to 400 trucks every month are being added to the system. That's a lot of trucks. And I'm concerned about how, will we be able to deliver 100 to 400 ZE trucks every month come January 2024? And I know you're deferring that part. The infrastructure question is obviously critical to that.
That was a helpful clarification. I don't think I understood that the first time that you were talking about it, with that it's new trucks, it's not the same dedicated fleet. That's good to know.
And so, you know, I guess one of the things I would urge you guys to consider is, you know, we've seen what a sudden shock in the supply chain is done during the course of the pandemic. We had a buildup of ships outside the ports. We have, you know, the entire supply chain is constrained. You know, if we come to that situation again, and the result, because we have a limited trucking capacity fleet, how will we respond from a regulatory stance to alleviate if it turns out that the availability of trucks is a cause of that problem in the future?
Okay, so a couple things I just want to respond to is, so, you know, we're open, you know, still to, you know, making modifications in the reg language. We think we've crafted it kind of carefully to, you know, one visit per year, like Lachey was saying, you know, to kind of continue keeping some of the legacy trucks that do visit the ports in service. But for example, just as in the beginning of the presentation, you know, we looked just at the beginning of this year, we had approximately 44,000 2010 or newer drayage trucks registered in our statewide drayage truck registry that were just California companies with California plates. So we have kind of a bigger pool of trucks that would be available if they were doing some type of drayage service, one visit, et cetera. So I do understand, like you said, you're seeing a lot of these trucks being turned over, et cetera. But, you know, we are looking at, you're starting with this pool, but there's a balance and, you know, how we transition this fleet till we get to 2035 as well. So we're open to having more conversations about that as well.
I guess one of the things I'd ask you to do on that is, you know, if and maybe you've already, I have seen some previous things from CARB staff that estimated a 5% turnover in the port drayage fleet. I think that estimate is too low. I'd ask you guys to take a look at the data from the LA Long Beach's drayage truck registry and look at the number of trucks that are being added on a monthly basis for the past 5 years and use that to model future truck populations and what will be needed in terms of ZE trucks beginning in 2024 to maintain an adequate trucking capacity to serve the ports. One other question, comment that I have is, or two more comments I have. One is on break bulk. I know in your proposed regulation you have exemptions for unibody trucks, and you know I think that was an appropriate universe of trucks when we were talking about rules that were limited to a diesel universe. One area that I'd ask you to consider or take additional look at is on break bulk. Break bulk, and I think this sort of gets to some of the comments that Phil Gibbons from the Port of San Diego was making. Break bulk tends to handle project cargo. It's very heavy. It goes far distances. It's the ability to move that cargo is outside the capability of today's ZE trucks, and we do not have a dedicated fleet for break bulk. Break bulk often is out-of-state trucks that are are taking advantage of moving cargo, specialty cargo from the port with specialty equipment capable of either oversized loads or heavy loads on far distances. And I'm concerned that with not including break bulk within the exemptions of the rule, that the ability to move project cargo, which can be heavy industrial equipment, steel slabs and rolled steel, things like blades for windmills, The ability to move that through California ports would be extremely challenging, if not impossible, given where the cargo is often destined and the prohibitions on dray off, because you wouldn't be able to move it very far.
So the one thing I would ask,
Yeah.
as we would take something like that into consideration, is if you provide us comments or emails, whatever, that you provide some numbers, like what percentage of trucks do you think are operating in that type of capacity, et cetera. So, what percentage of the throughput, how many trucks. So when if you do have comments that you could provide some data with that, that would be what we would do.
Break bulk in general is confined to California's smaller ports in general. There are facilities in LA Long Beach, but they are a very small minority of the facilities. When you look at most ports like LA Long Beach, it's mostly container traffic, which would be subject to this rule. Oakland's entirely container traffic. So we are talking about a very small slice of the pie. The last thing I'd like to touch on is earlier there was a discussion about the capability of the trucks, and one of the comments from staff was, we have a 2035 phase-in for this rule. That may be true for the larger ACF, but given the requirements in 2024, the trucking companies can't simply change their customers to match the capabilities of the ZE truck. That means that the ZE truck needs to match the capabilities of their current customers. And so the ZE truck needs to be a fully capable truck to be a true replacement for diesel. Again, there's concerns about today's capabilities. And again, that leads to questions about the supply and capacity of the trucking fleet to serve the ports. I'll leave it there. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Thomas.
Next in line to speak is Christopher Chavez. Christopher, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Great, thank you. This is Chris Chavez with Coalition for Clean Air. Just a couple quick comments. Just wanted to say that we support removing the drayage trucks that exceed their minimum useful life from the drayage registry. Looking at the projections that CARB offered, it's unfortunate that still about 20% of vehicles will either be gasoline or diesel powered by 2050. Again, it's unfortunate, especially for communities near goods movement corridors. For that reason, we really want to push and urge CARB to go further in removing as many diesel trucks from the road as possible and support expanding the minimum useful life requirement to all trucks. Also, just really quickly want to point out that the turnover of the pre-2010 trucks has been a missed opportunity. Almost all these trucks are being replaced with diesel, and particularly used diesel, rather than cleaner technologies that are available today. So certainly want to urge CARB to prepare for future turnovers in trying to get and build up as much as possible the infrastructure needed for clean trucks in the future. Really work with industry in trying and the ports and other relevant, other stakeholders in getting cleaner trucks out there more aggressively as we move forward in the future, so that we don't see a continued reliance on diesel-based goods movement and transportation. Just wanted to offer those quick comments. Thank you for this information presentation and your work on this issue.
Thank you, Christopher.
Next in line to speak is Amber Caluso. Amber, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Hi, this is Amber Caluso with the Port of Los Angeles. I'd like to thank CARB staff working with us on various regulations, including this one. We have a few comments, but that I think we should probably meet offline to discuss. But my main comment is with regards to reporting. In the way the regulation is currently written, it has the marine terminals gather the data and then they report quarterly to the ports. And then the ports gather that data and then report that to CARB. And that seems like an unnecessary step instead of having just the terminals report directly to CARB, since it's not clear in the regulation what happens in terms of enforcement for reporting. Because if a terminal fails to provide the data to the port and then the port submits incomplete data, who it would be at fault? And then there's no way of tracking how the terminals are reporting it to the port.
So I think, Amber, it's consistent with how the current process is. So the current process is the terminals would be reporting to the ports, and the ports would be consolidating that information and providing it to CARB. So, yeah. And that way we actually, see, and we can look at what the enforcement piece on that would be, but, you're familiar with your terminals and would know who would need to be reporting those trucks back to you, and then consolidating that information and getting that back to us. So that's how it's currently structured under the current rules. So, we can always, we're open to discussion. If there's another way, any way to streamline the reporting, we're happy to talk about that. But yeah, it is the same as what we currently have. So
yeah, it's because the way the data we receive it is that we actually have to pay the terminals for the data. So if it becomes regulation, then there'd be like, why would we need to pay for the data? And then it becomes more of a question of like, how would we get the data from them? So it's that's why it's kind of a weird enforcement action there, because it's like, well, right now we're paying for the data, but if it's regulation, then our accounting would be like, why are we paying for something that they're required by law to give to us? And so
understood.
And then also my other comment is with regards to the systems. So right now there's going to be, the way it is looking, that there's going to be a separate HD I&M reporting system. There's going to be the estate DTR. And then is this going to be a separate reporting system as well? So there's going to be 3 reporting systems that a drayage truck owner or fleet will have to report into.
Yeah, no, our goal is the current system will be migrated into another bigger system. We're hopefully looking to have that as part of what like they currently have for the truckers database or something similar. So we're looking at incorporating it into a bigger truck database for CARB. HD and I&M still at this point will be separate, but we're also looking at, how can we feed that with some of the other programs that we have to have, kind of a clearer one-based system. So that's work that we're working on now. And, we can continue. I know we've already had conversations with you about how that will work. So we're open to still talking about that. We're working with some of our IT staff, et cetera, to get that accomplished. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Next in line to speak is Mark Roast. Mark, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Thank you. Mark Roos, Sustainable Energy Inc. and Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition and Green Fleets Group. And first off, let's see here. Okay, why am I hearing about 2024 and not about December 31st, 2022 deadline for, and how many 2009 and earlier engine model year drayage trucks are required to switch to 2010 or engines or convert to battery or fuel cell power by December 31st, 2022? And do they qualify still for the manufacturer delay extension? That's a start. That's my first set of questions.
Okay, so currently there are approximately, I think, the last time I looked, I think there was about 6,000, at least in the drayage sector, the 07 to 09 model year engines that would be upgrading if they haven't already. I haven't looked as of recently. Some of those have already done that. So those will be required to be 2010 or newer starting next year. So there's your first, those are the diesel, and they can, at this point, they can, upgrade to 2010, purchase newer trucks, just depends on their business model.
Okay. And are there 2010 engines available for them?
Yeah, that's an older truck. I mean, right now we're looking, that truck is, those model years are already 12 years old. So in the drayage market historically, they've purchased, used trucks. A lot of that is the retired long haul fleets that they're purchasing.
Yeah.
So, I expect there's still market availability for that many trucks. Yes.
My understanding is that I was told by Bill Abudi in Oakland that he went to purchase 3 trucks as replacements, and he typically he was prepared to pay $30,000 to $50,000 each for trucks with 500,000 miles on them that'll last till 1 million miles. And he found there was only 1 truck available, and it had only 200,000 miles on it, and it was $150,000. So that broke his budget for all 3 trucks, but it was only 1 truck. So no, the stock has been depleted already. And that is crucial. It's crucial to know that the stock has been depleted, and to know that they're not able to, they cannot afford to purchase a new truck, because they get paid less. They're on the bottom of the totem pole. They get paid less than the medium haul and long haul truckers get. So, and plus they have to sit for 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is waiting for a load, so they don't get as many hours actually driving. So all of those are the practical reasons why they are forced to purchase trucks that old. And okay, so now we get to the next question. Is there, will you allow 2010 and earlier chassis to replace their 2009 and earlier engines with battery electric? And will you provide subsidies to enable their owners to stay in business if they are, in other words, if they are a 2010 or earlier chassis and a 2009 and earlier engine, are you trying to get rid of the whole truck, or are you only trying to get rid of the engine?
Let me pop in just a little bit. Hey, Mark, I'd like you to direct your comments to the task at hand here. We're talking about a regulation that would start in 2024. What we're spending the time on here is rehashing the truck and bus regulation. But I do have to mention that if you look on, just even on truckfavor.com, there's 50,000 trucks for sale right now.
Yeah, I looked and I saw that the prices were, none of the prices were down in the range that the drayage people would pay for.
I understand, but right, and so these trucks that we're asking to be replaced are 2007 to 09s. They are also going to be able to sell for quite a lot more than they normally would. And so buying used is still going to be, the cost is going to be what it takes to upgrade. But if you could direct your questions to or comments to the proposed regulation, that would be really helpful for us.
Okay, then I will pivot here. So now I understand why I'm hearing about 2024. So I understand there are 80,000 trucks that are going to be affected by the 2024 thing, and 40,000 of those are Class 8 heavy duty trucks. Are you going to be able to fund conversion of 40,000 trucks the same way? I mean, it doesn't seem like it, because it seems like that's an awful lot of dollars.
Yeah, and I don't, I can answer that in general. I don't think that our incentive programs are, designed to fund a regulation, so to speak, or to fund all the upgrades. I think they're designed to support the transition of technology. So I think in general, I think that that's what the incentive programs do, is they provide an incentive for somebody to begin that transition or to test that new technology in certain applications. So that's what the incentive programs are designed to do. They're not really designed to buy compliance, I guess, so to speak.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Next in line to speak is Jason Quaranto. Jason, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Yes, this is Jason Carranto with Hyzon Motors, and I just wanted to thank all the ARB staff for all their hard work. And then also, just to kind of talk about a little bit about the supply of vehicles. We do have a hydrogen fuel cell truck currently in demo mode with TTSI, and we hope to have our executive order any day. I think we'd have a little quicker if folks over in Alan Lyon's shop would quit retiring. But anyway, I just, we've talked a lot about the availability of vehicles, and I do kind of see this big, you have a bow wave coming of pre-buy in 2023. And do you see the incentive trying to match that, to encourage people to move straight into ZEVs instead of buying newer, diesel trucks? And with that, I'll hop off.
So, yeah, thank you for that, Jason. Yes, I think most of our incentive programs are geared toward the purchase of the zero emission trucks at this point, especially in the drayage space, obviously. So, most of the incentive programs are, being directed towards zero emission vehicles. So,
I mean, I understand that, but you're looking at a confluence of events here. You have a whole bunch of pre-2010 trucks that are going to, have to be phased out in 2023, and then you have this 2024 rule kicking in. So I kind of foresee a significant buy in 2023. And what I'm getting at is to make sure that the funding levels that are available match that, or has there been any concern that you'll have that big pre-buy?
Yeah. Hey, Jason, just to make sure we're all talking the same language, the deadline's January 1 of 23. Those purchases need to have already happened or need to happen like now. So yeah, we do recognize that. I mean, ideally, sure, we would love to see them go to zero emission rather than an interim step. But as we touched on, there is funding. The goal was to get 850 drayage trucks, but I'm pretty sure we're over 1,000. And as we touched on earlier, HVIP funding is an opportunity for that. There are other sources. That one still has money. So anybody who's listening and still needs to upgrade to a newer truck, yeah, we would just assume that be zero emission. So by all means, either access our web pages or others. There's other funding programs too, like the Energy Commission has one and so on.
All right, thanks.
Next in line to speak is Harmony Gates. Harmony, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Good morning. This is Harmony Gates with York Engineering. I've been following the various ACF different components of the rules. And so I appreciate that other folks have brought up the reporting aspects and the concerns for the challenges of different reporting mechanisms. For HDIM, I'm hoping that there would be a way for the reporting systems to take information that already exists and that the reporting mechanism can be streamlined so that it's reducing the burden on the operator or the person who has to do the reporting for these fleets to have multiple programs, because a drayage fleet could have drayage as well as high priority fleet and HDIM. So it becomes pretty cumbersome to report the same vehicle in multiple locations. So it's just a request that's really looked at closely, and I'm glad that it sounds like you have an IT team that's kind of looking into that. So that was my main focus at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Harmony.
Thank you.
Next in line to speak is Jamie Levine. Jamie, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak. I'm sorry, Jamie Levin.
Yeah, hey, that's okay. Jamie Levin with the Center for Transportation and the Environment. So just an update on the project that was referenced by several earlier. This is the NorCal Zero project, where we're deploying or will deploy by June of next year 30 Class 8 fuel cell trucks with Hyundai. This is the Exient fuel cell truck. So this truck is already commercially available in Europe, and we're going to deploy a US version of this truck that we believe will have significant performance capabilities to meet many, but not all the needs of drayage and fleet operators for heavy duty trucks. We're projecting a range of 400 to 500 miles, payload of up to 39,000 pounds, a fueling speed that can refuel these trucks within 10 to 20 minutes. And then, of course, providing with hydrogen fueling infrastructure resiliency, which is, I think, key for all these zero emission applications. But it's not fully commercial yet, in the sense that there are still some challenges. First of all, the price of the vehicles. Several speakers have raised concerns about affordability. And at this stage, these trucks are expensive, but we believe fully that that'll be addressed with volume production. And to that point, I think many are aware of DOE's Hydrogen Hub program, which is an $8 billion program to develop regional hydrogen fueling or production and fueling hubs around the country. We think California has a great opportunity to be extremely competitive. I don't see how California cannot be one of those hubs. But the interesting aspect of it is building fleet volumes as offtake for large quantities of hydrogen production and distribution. And so I think there might be a very good opportunity to deploy upwards of 1,000 or more trucks from a number of OEMs, not just Hyundai, but could be Hyzon, Nikola, Peterbilt, Freightliner. There are a number of opportunities to really grow the volumes, to start driving the cost of these trucks down. And that program will probably play out over the next 2 to 3 years, not an exact timing to the 2024 deadlines to start procuring zero emission, but it could be very close. We do know with Hyundai, given the commercial availability of their trucks in Europe, we expect by 2023, 2024 to have commercially available trucks to be able to do more than just short haul region drayage, but also to perform longer distance regional trips. But the second issue that has to be addressed is payload. We're aware that even with fuel cell, we're looking at a payload of around 39,000 pounds. We're aware that some of the drayage payloads are upwards of 50 to 55,000 pounds. So there still has to be movement in the direction of reducing tractor curb weight in order to sustain or handle larger loads. And then fuel price is a big factor. Even if you provide the trucks at an affordable capital expense, if the cost of operating those trucks is exorbitant, that's not going to go very far. But we do believe with this hydrogen hub program that DOE is pushing that we'll see reductions in fuel price that could reach parity with diesel. And then, of course, lastly, is station infrastructure. If you're going to support thousands of trucks, you've got to be able to build heavy duty fueling stations. I will say that with our NorCal Zero project, we're building a high capacity fueling station that could initially support 60 trucks and be able to fill rapidly in that 10 to 20 minute window, those trucks to be able to accomplish multiple duty cycles in a 24-hour period. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's all a matter of timing and recognizing there are still caveats and challenges that have to be addressed in order to meet the fleet operators' requirements to sustain economically their business. With that, I'll conclude, but I wanted to bring you up to date with where our project is and the significance of that project for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate the update.
Next in line to speak is Yasi Kavzed. Yasi, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Thank you so much. My name is Yasi Kavazadeh, and I'm a senior campaign representative with Sierra Club National. And I wanted to thank staff first for their thorough presentation today. And I'll start with a comment and then pivot to my question. I live in Riverside County near the 15 and 91 freeways and see drayage trucks often near my home and many schools and parks as they drop off goods at warehouses and head over to the ports and rail yards. We need to electrify drayage trucks soon and can't afford any delays. As stated earlier, California has an air pollution problem. The American Lung Association has rated the Los Angeles Air Basin as the #1 area for ozone in the country. And at the same time, major corridors like Los Angeles and Long Beach are pledging to electrify fleets at the ports and are working on regulations that are essential for heavy-duty vehicle infrastructure charging. While the South Coast Air Basin is also working on rulemaking for indirect sources at the ports and rail yards. These opportunities bestow the responsibility for beneficial cargo owners and operators to move their practices away from NOx-emitting diesel and gas. And the ACF for drayage will be an essential piece for healthy air and public health benefits. Now for my question. As CARB gathers zero-emission drayage drugs in its registry, will you all or other partner agencies be collecting data about the quantity of vehicles providing a net benefit to the grid as we see two-way charging technology for vehicle-to-grid infrastructure grow in the market? I believe these solutions will benefit the grid reliability. And in fact, the Department of Energy just signed a monumental MOU with the National Electrical Contractors of America and IBEW to ensure a robust and talented workforce to install vehicle to everything, they're calling it. So will you all be tracking the sort of net benefit in kilowatt hour for vehicle to grid technology and charging infrastructure as we begin to look at the rulemaking down the line?
So thank you, Yasi, for your comments. And then I would say that hasn't come up as far as us being able to track that as far as the system. I imagine some of the utilities will be tracking that type of information more on a local type level, but that's a good opportunity for us to look at kind of what the additional benefits could be. But there's nothing, that's the first time I've actually heard anybody ask or put in that request. So.
Next in line to speak is Mark Miller. Mark, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak. Mark, your mic is still muted from your end. Unmuted, you're ready to go.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
I think I finally got 3 mute buttons on my end. So Mark Miller with the Volvo Group. I just wanted to make a comment regarding the availability and suitability capability of current ZEVs to meet the initial demands as well as delivery aspects too. So there was a comment made earlier regarding the Volvo VNR having a range of only 100 miles. So that the first generation that was initially launched did have a maximum range of 150 miles. But earlier this year, we launched our Gen 2 battery system. So that's now their 275-mile maximum range with a 565 kilowatt hour battery capacity. Additionally, the VNR was launched in some limited configurations to expedite getting these things to market. We have since also expanded that slightly. We had 3 configurations before: a 4x2 box truck, a 6x2, and a 4x2 tractor. We've added a 6x4 box truck configuration as well as a 6x4 tractor configuration additionally. And we have delivered several of these trucks. We recently also took an order for 110 additional units for Maersk, who's running 16 of our VNREs tractors in drayage operations down in Southern California today. So they're capable. The technology, as it matures, will increase that capability. The ranges will continue to go up for battery electric. Additionally, on top of that, there are other technologies. There's been a lot of discussion around fuel cell. A year ago, Daimler and Volvo announced a joint venture, cell-centric, to develop fuel cells in Germany. That work is underway. So we will be bringing fuel cells to market. Additionally, we'll be expanding our offering. Today, the Volvo Group in North America offers the Nova LFS electric transit bus. We offer the Mack LR electric refuse truck, and we offer truck and tractor configurations of the VNR electric. But we do have plans to expand that offering across more of our product line. So the availability will be there. Additionally, we do have very limited production slots left for this year. Everybody, my understanding, is pretty full in terms of their build schedules, but we do hold slots open in some cases, and I would expect that we've still got some slots available for the electric, VNR electric and the LR electric from Mack as well. So we will continue to deliver those throughout this year as orders come in, and our volumes will be increasing as we move forward each year. So I don't think the availability is going to be a significant issue. But I think there are other aspects of this that need to be considered if you're looking at electrifying your fleet. And primarily, you need to get started on your infrastructure before you even start thinking about ordering trucks, because that's really going to be the long lead time item there compared to potentially getting a truck on order and built and delivered. So I just wanted to note that. And I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the update on the status of production, et cetera, and availability. Appreciated.
Next in line to speak is Todd Campbell. Todd, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Good morning. I wasn't sure for a second if it was still morning. Thank you everyone for the great presentation today. I just had some reactions. Well, first I wanted to applaud Chris Chavez's points on we need to move away from diesel, and you know, I've been harping on the issue that port fleets are going to be turning over significantly before deadlines, and sadly I think most of them are going to go diesel, and for a number of speakers that have spoken already, due to the economics, that's going to be their logical move. So I think we've already missed a major opportunity to capture the combustion fleet and make sure that the combustion fleets don't just buy 2014 compliant diesels, but I guarantee you that's what they're going to do, or they're going to maximize, based on their own business models and decisions, what they'll do to delay having to really have to deal or contend with this rule. It's really unfortunate, given the fact that my family lives and breathes in the South Coast Air Basin, and we're close to the ports, and it's tragic from my end, especially since my whole career has been dealing with ports. mostly. But beyond that, I guess, my question for you guys is, I heard a lot of the back and forth about availability and also the emphasis about funding available. But I have to say that when I look at the HVIC program, the unredeemed amount of funds, which is about 95% that go directly for ZEV, battery electric vehicle applications, is unredeemed. In other words, for the $286 million that's been allocated, 281 million and a half of that, dollars in that pot continues to go unused. And I've looked at this number for quite some time. And I just was wondering, and my first question is, how does staff interpret that? Because that's been a fact for a while now for this program. And in fact, we've actually seen most recently that the program isn't being oversubscribed. To me, yes, light, maybe some medium duty ZEVs have been being fulfilled because I think the technology is much further along. But when we look at, the heavy duty sector, I think there's a lot of money just sitting around and not being spent because there is not that much product out there. And so how do you guys interpret this substantial amount of funds, almost more than $250 million just sitting in the bank, not being spent?
I'm going to defer that to somebody who works more closely to funding to be able to respond to that. So
sure.
There's somebody, let me see who we have on here.
I don't know if we have anybody that is as familiar with the funding. All I can say is I know that in terms of some of the HVIP solicitations, there were 2 that were less than 6 months ago. Roughly, I'm guessing a little bit here. And both tranches were taken in a matter of minutes on the same day. And then there was more funding made available in this 3rd tranche, and that continues to still be available. So for those very recent ones, 4 or 5 months is just not a realistic time to get almost any truck. So I don't see that as an issue. Past history, I have no information that I can't speak to that in terms of how that's changed over time.
Tony, that's fair. I guess I would just encourage you to take a look at that, because I've been looking at these numbers for a very long time and I haven't seen much change in.
Yeah, all I can say is I'm a little more familiar with what's going on buses. And
sure.
So there's hundreds out there.
I think buses are different. To be honest, I mean, for me, to be honest, I think buses are very different than trucks.
Sure, they're definitely heavy duty Class 8, most of them. There's fuel cell and battery electric there.
Yeah.
Motors, everything else aren't very different, or aren't different actually at all. And so it's the same technology.
Yeah. The other thing, Tony, I wanted to kind of ask you in terms of infrastructure, because you made the comment that for electric infrastructure, the utilities would cover, substantial, if not most of the cost. Are you talking about the regulated utilities? Because I actually have, there's substantial portions of the state that is also, managed by municipal utilities, and I'm finding it quite difficult to actually put in heavy duty truck electrical infrastructure in those areas. And that's not a criticism of the munis. I'm just saying I'm not finding the same level of benefit, but at the same time, they're an important piece of territory in and around ports and inland ports that it does make a difference. And I will tell you, one of the projects we were considering, we were told it would cost us about $10 to $11 million to do, which killed the project immediately. So are you just talking about the utilities that are regulated by the PUC and that have the allocations, or
I'm referring to the SB 350 program that investor-owned utilities have, in essence, and the PUC made some decision, some years ago that they would cover.
So just be aware that may be the case for a territory like Southern California Edison or PG&E or SDG&E. but it's not the case for munis, and munis do have important territories that service critical ports.
No, and I want to make sure we're not confusing the matter. I mean, if the funding is there, by all means, take advantage of it. We're not suggesting that the regulation is at all predicated on that funding, but it is there now. And 5 years down the road, who knows?
If there's a way that ARB could help in those areas, I think that would be really important.
Yeah, and for those, I guess we didn't spend too much time on it, but yeah, we're working closely with the governor's office, with CPUC, and indirectly through the utilities and the Energy Commission and so on to ultimately, facilitate the expansion of this market and electrification, across the board, not just even transportation. So there's a lot going on in those areas.
Yeah, and then of course, as I made comments all this week, if there is an opportunity, if you're finding yourselves making exemptions, hopefully you're not, because, we need clean air. I just would strongly encourage staff to consider including, 0.02 certified omnibus equipment, no matter the fuel type, although I'd encourage it not to be diesel, as an option, because I'd sure hate to see more opportunities fall through the cracks. Thank you.
All right, next in line to speak. Oh, Jessica, sorry, go ahead.
That was okay. I just said thank you. Appreciate those comments.
Next in line to speak is Tracy Fidel. Tracy, I've unmuted your line. You may speak.
All right. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Like everyone else, thank you for hosting this workshop. I wanted to follow up on PMSA's comments because the Port of Oakland is also concerned about a truck shortage due to both the old rule that's about to sunset and the upcoming rule. Most of the truckers here at the Port of Oakland are independent owner operators with, one single truck, maybe two, and that were usually purchased used and not new. On top of that, we have an aging workforce with most drivers in their 50s. So what we've been hearing is that most drivers will probably leave the industry because they won't be able to afford a zero emissions vehicle, or apply for a grant or install charging equipment or have the wherewithal to generate and sell LCFS credits. It seems like that's asking a lot of most truck drivers. So it seems like this regulation will effectively end that business model. Here at the port, we foresee that the attrition is going to happen quickly, starting in 2024, and that will only compound the congestion and supply chain issues that we're seeing today. So that was my comment on the reg. I had two quick questions. So it sounds like CARB is setting up a brand new separate drayage truck registry and you'll be migrating over to it. Will all the existing trucks in the DTR be automatically transferred into the new one?
Yeah. So thank you for your comments, Tracy. Yes, that is the goal with the system, is to take the trucks that are currently registered in the existing drayage truck registry and migrate that fleet into a new system.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And then my second question is similar to Amber Caluso's. I was hoping you could tell me more about the reporting requirement for visit frequency. So right now in the report that I provide, at least, we don't provide visit frequency, just VIN and license plate of all the trucks in our STEP registry, because the ports, at least the Port of Oakland, does not collect information on visit frequency. So how do you see that working? Or like Amber said, is it something that the terminal operators could provide to you directly without the port sort of as a middleman?
So each port currently does it a little bit different, Tracy. So most ports are turning away any trucks that are non-compliant. So they don't have a non-compliant reporting component, so to speak. So you're not reporting any trucks that are not compliant. And that's what I believe your current business model is at Port of Oakland. So outside of that, what we're looking for is we need to verify that a truck has visited annually. So we're looking at having the ports report all visits back to us. So currently, not just the list at the end of the year of trucks that visited, because that's currently what we get, like these trucks with these VINs visited. We don't have any visit frequency. So of the trucks that you report currently, we're not seeing how many times each truck has visited. So we're looking to have you report that information back to us. So it'd have a VIN and then the visit frequency, the dates that they visited.
So, but we don't have that. I don't know how we would get it.
Right. So, you know, like I said, that's part of what the requirements, what we're looking at, because we do need to look at what those thresholds are, to look at the legacy fleets, how many times they visited. So, I mean, if you have specific comments on that, you can, you know, please provide them to us. But I do know that's not currently how you report information to us. So.
Would it be enough for you to just know, did it come one or more times? Or do you need the actual dates of every single visit?
That's a great question or comment. We can look at that. Do we need the frequency, or do we just need to know who visited over that year? So that's a good point. Like I said, I'm open to streamlining any of the reporting requirements that we have, as long as we're able to achieve the goals that we've set for. So we can look at that. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Next in line to speak is Tamara Raspberry. Tamara, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Great, thank you. Let me find my notes. Thank you, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of the Environmental Justice League, and thank you for the workshops, and these comments kind of apply across the board. But as we've heard before, that people are tired of these diesel zones near ports and along heavy trade corridors and warehouses. We support CARB's efforts to ensure that diesel emissions are eliminated at the ports as quickly as possible. No new diesel truck purchases should be allowed to be purchased or to operate at our ports. Clean, renewable fuels should displace the harmful diesel fuels. Excuse me. We also like to point out, and this has been mentioned before in earlier comments, that if fleets file for a zero emission drayage truck exemption due to lack of electric charging or hydrogen infrastructure, or if no zero emission trucks are available on the market, then we're asking that staff require the cleanest internal combustion truck be available to purchase, such as a low NOx truck at 0.2 grams. That type of truck should qualify as a near zero emission truck. And I know that this group doesn't apply to this statement, but while I have the floor, I'll say it, that we want to make sure that CARB staff is thinking about battery recycling and how such facilities should not be placed in disadvantaged communities. We don't want to repeat of Exide in our neighborhoods again. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara.
Next in line to speak is Matt Trapp. Matt, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Yes, hello, good late morning. Matt Trapp with the Harbor Trucking Association. I'll just jump right into questions and won't try to editorialize too much here. First question, is ARB planning on updating their baseline 2019 drayage number fleet prior to the 45-day relanguage, the SORIA, total cost effectiveness analysis, et cetera?
I don't think Stephanie is on the line anymore, but I don't believe so. I think that was the baseline.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back.
Oh, you are. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, so the 2019 data is what we got, the latest available data we got from port and rail yards. So that was used to develop MFAC 2021, and everything, the inventory is based on that base year plus the future projection.
So it's only MFAC, it's not actually doing surveys or looking at containerized movement data when it's available, as you heard from Port of Oakland. And it sounds like you're going to regulate them into figuring out how to get the marine terminals to share that daily truck activity. But just looking from today with active trucks at Port of LA and Long Beach, there's 1,000 more trucks that are registered that are active in LA Long Beach than you're accounting for in your 2019. So I imagine that would directly impact the total overall cost of this. So next question, I guess, is it sounds like you're not going to be updating it, is will you be parsing out drayage specific operations for any type of total cost analysis that'll be done for the 45-day language?
So we do have in the SORIA, we do have a separate drayage total cost analysis that will be released. I believe that's coming in June, Matt. But it is based on the 2019 data.
And so everything will be based on 2019 data, including battery costs?
This is Paul, I can jump in. So for this trip, we are trying to use the latest data wherever we can. So I think our battery cost data is coming from a 2021 Department of Energy report, as are most of our vehicle costs. So that's where that's coming from.
The last time that I had seen you guys refer to any type of cost analysis for drayage was in that December meeting, and that was the 2019 data. So understanding that, I guess that was already 2 years old at that point in time. So, okay, thank you. And in this cost analysis, will you guys be differentiating between a drayage truck that can utilize low carbon fuel credits and those that can't, and how that cost is ultimately borne by the truck operator?
This is Paul again. I think our current plan is that we'd be looking at fleets who are using depot charging, and that would probably refer to larger fleets than those who are relying on retail charging. I think our current assumption is that those who are relying on depot charging will be able to take advantage of LCFS credits. Those who are using retail charging are essentially paying whatever the pump says, so they won't be able to separately take advantage of LCFS.
So are you going to differentiate between that in the cost analysis?
That's the current intention.
I'm sorry, Paul, what was that?
That's what we're currently planning to do.
Okay. And then following up on the infrastructure side of things, really from Chris's question initially, and Jessica, you had alluded to the fact that there was plans for 9 public-facing charging stations in LA Long Beach. I'm sure we all realize statewide there's like 5,000 fueling facilities that offer diesel. Majority of those obviously in populated areas. So I'm a little beside myself that we've known that this workshop was coming, and you guys are still unable to answer questions about infrastructure availability. It's disconcerting as a regulated community when we hear of an entry standard that's starting in less than 2 years, a year and a half, really. It's not 2035, Tony. It's honestly 2024, January 1st. And there's nothing that's giving any comfort to any level of any fleet operator for infrastructure availability, not just for opportunity charging, but even on the depot side, whether or not the grid is able to accommodate the amount of energy that's going to be necessary. So I'm wondering when exactly we can expect to see a more robust analysis of exactly how much fueling charging infrastructure is going to be available, both on an opportunity public facing charging side, as well as depot charging. Because in drayage, I'm sure I would imagine, as you guys are coming to understand, most of these properties are leased. They are not owned by the operator, and they do not have the ability to start tearing up the parking lots to putting in infrastructure. That is a property owner function. So curious when we can expect, as the regulated drayage community here, and really for the larger statewide community, for anyone who's subject to the high priority fleets, public fleets, federal or otherwise, when we can expect something from the ARB to start outlining these standards. And, if you just tell me that that's the CEC's problem, or it's in their purview, I don't know if that passes the smell test, considering you guys are the ones who are regulating the use of the vehicles at the end of the day.
So Matt, let me clarify. So is your comment that we should be planning all of the infrastructure and private industry shouldn't be?
Nice try, Tony. No, what I'm saying
Okay,
is
I
that
want to be clear. Yeah.
you should be explaining to the regulated community about what the projections for infrastructure are, and whether that takes CEC coming onto these calls as well to start explaining exactly what their plans are to support the needed gigawatts of additional infrastructure power, at least additional grid capacity that we're going to need to support this regulation. Because even from the 2019 numbers, you're talking about 33,000 trucks that are subject to the drayage rules between rail yards, other seaports, LA, Long Beach, et cetera. And really, you can't even say with certainty if that's the actual number, because it's based on your MFAC projections, not necessarily direct gate move analysis by each particular covered facility. So, if we're doing 1,000 trucks a year, we can pretty much do the math and how long that's going to take to fully turn over the fleet. But we're expecting infrastructure to be available for people who, as of January 1st, 2024, who want to put a truck into trade service to be able to charge that truck. And I hear all my OEM friends and partners out there. Yeah, they're all saying, no problem, trucks, we got them. Just come and order them. We'll build them. No worries. It's not the truck, it's the infrastructure and some place to charge it. And so I feel there's a responsibility on behalf of the ARB during these workshops to talk about available infrastructure. And yeah, private industry is going to have to make a decision because you guys are regulating this, but this all plays into how much cost and total cost of ownership the regulated community is going to need to expect.
Okay, so yeah, Matt, so for one, yes, we will be looking at the cost implications, but not necessarily specifically where any particular charging infrastructure or fueling infrastructure would be. And I'm not looking to make you mad or anything, but yes, the Energy Commission does have the lead in forecasting and planning associated with infrastructure build out. You might be familiar with the IPER process for that. And we, again, are working closely with them. And I don't know the details at this point, but we did that series of work group meetings on infrastructure, 5 separate meetings where these kinds of topics were discussed, and those are available online as well. But yeah, I mean, a number of us have a role here in helping facilitate the market, to get there. But in terms of forecasting needs and ultimately the utilities would actually carry it out, that's being done as part of the state's overall plan, and it goes beyond just trucks.
Right, and I appreciate that slide being brought up there, and I do appreciate that, Tony. I guess the point is that when we go through these and people ask about infrastructure, you guys don't have any answers for it, and where the equipment's going to need to be deployed. Well, we know where the covered facilities are in California, and obviously there's efforts underway to try to map out where the most appropriate fueling infrastructure deployment is going to be. However, again, we're looking at a date as of 1/1/24 and little, if any, infrastructure to support it, especially on the public-facing opportunity charging side. So it'll be interesting to see how you guys are going to reconcile this in the SRIA, as well as the final TCO calculations, whether or not trucks as a service is going to be in there and what those actual true costs are, and the difference between financing rates for a small fleet versus a large fleet. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of work to do in the time, but if we get to the point where we are closer to the 45-day language and we keep having these workshops, I would just recommend that maybe the CEC jumps into the mix to try to explain, because again, the regulated community doesn't necessarily have time to go sit through the separate Energy Commission workshops on this. They figure that ARB is the final arbiter of many of these decisions. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I just want to make one more comment. I mean, so yeah, in terms of the cost assumptions and other things, we also had more than one work group meeting on it and are relying on that. So that, again, that was 6 months ago, even a year ago, we had a lot of these discussions to get to interest rates, other assumptions that would be reasonable and available for comment as to if they weren't, and what better information to use for those analyses. So that works largely there. And then it will obviously be disclosed as part of our moving forward as to what those assumptions are and what the analysis looks like given where we end up with the regulation.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to it, as I'm sure as every heavy duty vehicle owner is. And then last question, why isn't there an assumption, or at least, a consideration for vehicles that have purchased, whether it's low NOx or diesel or whatever, not ZEV, an internal combustion engine that's purchased prior to September 1st of this year that might not be available for deployment or at least delivered until after 2024? Will there be one-off considerations for people who have placed their orders but have not seen delivery by 1/1/24? And what will that process be? Or is it all bets are off 1/1/24, you need to be ZEV or nothing?
So this is one of the areas I think we're looking at, like how we can align, with the high priority, if that is something that we see that's needed. So it's a good point. I already took it down in our notes from our previous conversation, Matt. So appreciate that.
Wait, I'm sorry, and just to clarify, Matt, so your example was specifically, they're ordering this year before September. Let's presume they're meeting truck and bus requirement, and the truck is still not delivered almost a year and a half later by 2024.
It'd be a year and 3 months, and yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next in line to speak is Billy Boos. Billy, I've unmuted your mic. You may speak.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes.
Hello, hi. I had a question and concern about the actual increased weight of the BEVs, which is significant to a diesel tractor, and also a significant increase to a CNG tractor of at least 5,000 to 7,000 pounds. Is CARB working with Caltrans to come up with a container weight exemption for the port area for increased gross combination weight?
I think there's already some, I cannot remember the legislation that describes this. Tony, do you have that for the increased weight for the batteries? There's an offset.
Yeah, Paul probably remembers it. It's 2,000
I think
pounds.
it's AB 2601 or.
Yes, AB 2061 gives an increased 2,000 pounds.
Correct, okay.
Which is great for a CNG powered vehicle because that covers the increased weight from a diesel tractor. The EVs are going to have an additional 5,000 pounds on top of what a CNG tractor would be. So that is going to be a $5,000 decrease in cargo capacity, which is going to limit what containers can be pulled by an EV.
Yes, so let's start with the fuel. So with the fuel cell trucks, I'm not sure that there's really going to be a whole lot of difference with CNG, but obviously the details will matter. But it's going to be in the same ballpark. In terms of battery electric, it is going to be dependent on the size of the battery and the range of the vehicle, because obviously bigger batteries.
Right. Okay. Well, I can speak factually for one of the vehicles that's currently being produced. It's coming in at about 22,000 pounds, which is 7,000 pounds heavier than a diesel. And it is going to be a major concern for fleet owners to be purchasing vehicles and not be able to haul containers that they would normally be able to be able to haul. So currently there's an overweight intermodal shipping container permit that's valid up until June 30th, 2022, which allows up to 88,000 pounds gross combination weight. Have you spoken, are you in communication with Caltrans to extend this indefinitely? And that was Executive Order N1921.
That's something we can definitely look into. You can see, when that provision expires and see if we have a contact at Caltrans to discuss that specifically.
It's a major issue. I have a client that is placing a significant order for EVs, but without getting a weight variance or being able to haul in that corridor at Port of Long Beach, then it's going to be very difficult for them to continue to pull a certain amount of containers because they'll be overweight based upon Caltrans limits.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that, so I appreciate that.
Okay, is that something we can discuss at a later, well, sooner than later date? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're open to, you can reach out to us directly, and we can always follow up with you
Okay.
on a separate meeting. We're happy to do that.
That's something we can do for Monday?
What was that? Say that again?
Is that something we can schedule for Monday, please?
For Monday? Why don't you go ahead and send me an email? We might be able to find a spot on Monday. I'm not going to say no.
Good enough. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Billy.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Mike Tunnel, you're next in line to speak. Mike, I've unmuted your mic and you may speak.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the webinar, and just wanted to follow up on some things that were said earlier. So Jessica, I appreciate that you're looking kind of how the drayage rule interacts with the high priority rule and kind of the exemptions that you see in the high priority rule. One being backup vehicle is kind of for capacity concerns, daily mileage being whether the vehicle can travel the distance needed. And I would just note on that the day that vehicle is out the door, it's going to decrease its mileage capability as the battery ages. So I don't know exactly where you determine that line, but obviously the rule in the other side of the rule envisions some daily mileage situations. And then infrastructure, as you've heard from many of the commenters today, is a concern, as well as the vehicle delivery. And so when I look at that side of the rulemaking, I go, well, those all seem reasonable. And I wonder why they're not in the drayage side. And so I would encourage you to, look at what those are and how they interact with the drayage side of the business, because I think they're all appropriate and should be added. And beyond that, what concerns me is what we don't envision. And, the example today, somebody bringing in a refrigerated load from out of state that hits the port. I mean, what are they going to do? Not accept that load? You have to take that load. So you really need to, as you talk about this, you learn about things and you'll need to accommodate those situations. But I'm sure as we get down the road, the rules in place, there'll be other situations that you hadn't envisioned. And then, so to wrap things up, my question to you is there flexibility, or will there be flexibility in this regulation to address situations that occur on a case-by-case basis administratively? Or is this if things become a big issue, then you'll have to go back in rulemaking?
So yeah, I recognize the concerns, the out-of-state refrigerated trucks, and it's not a requirement that the ports turn away load. That's a decision made at the ports. They can always report them. They might be subject to enforcement action. Unfortunate, but that is currently the way that it works under the current drayage truck registry. So if a truck comes in from out of state, it's non-compliant. Either they have to figure out how to transfer that load to a cleaner truck, or they are subject to that if they are let into a port, and which does happen. We do get non-compliant truck reports back from the ports. So, I do see, I know there was, some flexibility that was built into like the truck and bus before. They had like a 3-day pass. There's other things, so there's things that we can think about. So I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, we do have to remember that, these are the ports and the rail yards are operating in disadvantaged communities here in California. We are looking for a full zero fleet by 2035. A lot of our neighboring states are also adopting similar zero emission rules. So, there's a lot of movement here, but I do understand, what you're saying there, Mike. So once again, if you have something specific, we're open to those suggestions. You're welcome to send those our way. We can, we'll continue to consider everything until we get to the 45-day notice.
Yeah, so just the last part of that was, is there a mechanism to address administratively situations that come up that are not in the rule on a case-by-case basis?
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Well, say,
Hey, Mike, I'm going to jump in because ultimately this becomes an issue with Office of Administrative Law. And one of the basic criteria is that everything is laid out in the rule. So as the general concept or the general premise of your question would be no, there isn't an ability to just administratively do something on the side that's not covered in the regulation. And so you see that with truck and bus and so on, we put in the provisions. The criteria have to be met, otherwise they don't apply. And if they're not addressed, then there is no administrative way to go outside the bounds of what the language allows. And so we try to address that by putting in the provisions as appropriate. But even then, that they have to be as clear as possible as to what's allowed to change, what's not allowed to change.
okay, thanks, Tony. That's helpful. I mean, and I think that really emphasizes the need to make sure that you have some level of ability to handle situations. And I'm not saying, Jessica, we're trying to create exemptions left and right and get everybody out. What I'm saying is there will be situations that come up that need to be addressed, and you need to put as best as you can envision it into the regulation, because what Tony just said is if we don't envision it, it can't be in there. So, or there, I should say, you can't really address it. So,
So Mike, I mean, that's why we do the workshops too, and comments and feedback and so on is very helpful. So if anybody at this meeting thinks of a situation, well, one, bring it to our attention, but two, it's providing some details around what the scenario might be is quite helpful to understand, but to put that more in context. It's just an example. The refrigerated load example was brought up, and clarifying what the issue was, and the fact that you're talking about different trucks each year as opposed to the same trucks every year, and things like that are important details to understand, to be able to anticipate what is the best solution potentially.
Thank you.
Next in line to speak, we have two more participants with their hands up. It's about lunchtime, so I'm going to call on Ken McIntosh. Ken, I've unmuted your mic and you may speak.
Hello? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have a real just kind of quick question because we deal with drayage, non-drayage. I just want to just clarify that the I'm sorry, I was doing something else. That the 800,000 miles and 18 years old, that is drayage only, not like over the road truck.
Tony?
So yeah, I guess I'll jump in. So we kind of covered this on Monday. Was the one of the compliance option for the high priority fleets. So these are generally fleets with 50 million revenues, over 50 trucks, any type of truck in essence, over 8,500 pounds. So vans and pickups all the way up to semis. One of the options is to purchase ZEVs going forward from 24 and on, and then this useful life concept would apply to the older trucks that would have to be removed from service in California, just like this drayage concept works. And then the other approach that fleets have the choice to use is meet a percentage of the fleet milestone schedule that lays out a transition where age and miles is really doesn't factor into the compliance, because it's simply a percentage of the fleet needs to be zero emission. And at that point, we're just counting trucks. So any age doesn't really matter as long as
We
that.
employ some of the independent carriers. And so, with that, they're looking at replacing trucks because of the model engineer 2010 or newer.
Yeah.
But on my non-drayage guys, they're worried about if they go buy a truck and then 2 years, all of a sudden they're stuck with the 800,000 miles or 18 years old, more along the 800,000 mile rule. And now all of a sudden they're looking for another truck, and again, trucks are not cheap right now. So, and then to go to ZEV trucks, et cetera. So I'm just trying to clarify that is that something that's going to be switched over to all trucks, or is it just strictly drayage?
So, well, okay. So maybe we can go offline for covering more detail, but I'll at least try to cover it in general. But yeah, if you're a fleet that has, I'm assuming you're over the 50 truck category, and if you have owner operators working for you and so on, you can include all of them as part of your fleet to meet the milestone. And so the milestone requirement would be 10% of the fleet in 25 or 7, depending on your fleet makeup, would have to be zero emission. And so so we call that a combination fleet. So in that case, if you made 10% of the trucks zero emission that were yours, then those other operators can keep operating their trucks until the next ratchet up to 25% and so on. And then eventually over time, they would also have to electrify. So that's where that milestone approach, as long as you're meeting the percentages, we don't care which trucks get upgraded, as long as the minimum ZEV milestone gets met. Otherwise, the default option is all the trucks in the fleet would just get, in essence, removed from the fleet at the 800,000 miles or 18-year milestone and be replaced with the ZEV whenever that year happens to occur. Okay. So hopefully that helps. So if you're going by that model year approach, then let's just say somebody upgrades to a 2015 model year engine, then it'll be 13 years after that, or 2028 to potentially 2032 that they would then have to upgrade to a zero emission.
Okay.
So, but if you have more questions, you can reach out to us. Anybody's email that you have, we'll make sure it gets sent to the right person, or we have a ZEV fleet, or let's try to put up on the slide here, the contact.
Yeah, I can also add that we do have the slide deck from this Monday's presentation posted, and the recording is also online at the moment. So we can flip through the slides or look at the recording if that would help also.
So you contact us by email as well if something's not clear.
And all right, and where's the slide deck at?
If you're familiar with the Advanced Clean Fleets webpage, we have a meetings and events link on the left, and then that shows you all the different meetings. So the meeting you would be interested in was May 2nd.
Yeah, Molly posted a link to it in the chat if you want to take a look there.
All right,
again,
perfect.
Any trouble finding it, just email us. We'll
all right, thank you very much.
All right, next in line to speak is Mark Roost. Mark, I've unmuted your mic and you are the last speaker.
Okay. Let's see, what was it I wanted to talk about? Mark Roost, Sustainable Energy Inc., Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. So I guess I want to actually sort of let other people know and ask if there's so much of a shortage of available used vehicles, and there's also the issue of the charging. So we have answers to both technologies. We don't have them in production yet, and we are a long-lived startup essentially. So we're bringing new technologies that have been worked on for decades, 5.5 decades for solar and 2 decades for battery. And we would like to talk with people who are concerned about this situation that they're in, that their companies are in, and who possibly could afford to subsidize or help or invest in moving some technology forward. And we're looking at 3 to 6 months from funding to be able to do solar that is 32 to 42%
Hey, Mark,
efficient.
we're not an advertising platform. Is
Okay.
anything here associated with the rule that you want to bring to our attention?
There's actually so many things. Okay, no, that's just a statement. Okay. I guess that most of my other stuff is advertising in that sense. I'm sort of feeling stymied, so
Yeah.
I guess I'll yield now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Yeah, and if you want to get information to us, you can send it directly to us those emails.
All right.
And things of that nature. So, but yeah, we're looking for feedback on the proposed rules and requirements.
Okay, thank you.
So, there appears to be no other speakers.
Yeah, no, that looks right, Tony. So this actually does conclude our week-long series of 3 workshops, specifically focused on the updated draft regulation language for the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. So again, we appreciate your participation. This has been very productive. We would like to continue the conversation. Our email address is listed on the slide. You can also submit your comments to our informal comment log. The link to that submission form is available on our website as well. And again, we want to thank everyone for participating, and this closes the meeting.